mi ò ní ṣẹ̀jẹ̀bú o.
Ó ṣé o ọmọọba ẹnjìníà Tóyìn, God bless you.
Torí mi ò lè má mu gàrí.
Tí Ìjẹ̀bú yẹn ló ṣòro ṣe jù.
Mi ò ní ṣẹ̀jẹ̀bú o.
Àti gàrí àti èbèrèbò àti kọ́kọ́rẹ́.
Àti kọ́kọ́rẹ́.
Exactly. Ẹ ti mọ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ti Ìjẹ̀bú rí. Ẹ lè jí iṣẹ́ Àwórì, ẹ lè ṣe gbogbo Àwórì, irú àwọn Àwórì yẹn ẹ lè má ṣe wọ́n ṣeré lójoojúmọ́.
Èmi ò ní ṣe Àwórì o, torí mo kọjá ìjọ tá a lọ wo oko, mo sì rí i pé èèyàn gbọ́dọ̀ ṣẹ̀wọ̀n.
Ọ̀tọ̀ ni wọ́n ní kíní kan tó ń pè ní zàǹgbétọ́.
Kí ni ń jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀?
Orò wọn ni. Orò yẹn wọ́n initiate mi sínú ẹ̀. Orò ibi tí kíní kan máa ń go round and round and round bẹ́ẹ̀ kò sí nǹkan kan nú ẹ̀. Àjọ̀nú ló wà nú ẹ̀. Àwọn Àwórì àti Ègùn náà ní zàǹgbétọ́. Ń gbọ́ Ọ̀túnba ṣẹ̀mọ́ ń pẹ̀.
Àṣírí tẹ̀ ń tú yẹn láti ṣọ́ra o.
Ilẹ̀ Wúsà.
Àṣírí tẹ̀ ń gbé fáwọn èèyàn yẹn láti ṣọ́ra o.
Àwọn tí mi ṣàṣírí ọmọ awo ni mí. Mo kàn ń ṣe description fún wọn ni.
Torí àwọn èèkùn wá ní ọ̀rọ̀ tẹ̀ ń gbé fún yàn yìí.
Ó ti rí i. Àwọn èmi tí mo jẹ́ aṣíwájú wọn mi tó tú awo wọn.
Mo trust yín. Ó gbà bẹ́ẹ̀.
Zàǹgbétọ́.
Zàǹgbétọ́.
Ègùn tó ń jẹ́ Joseph tí ọ̀rẹ́ ẹ̀ sọ pé kó má ṣàṣírí òun fún, kó má ṣàṣírí òun fún anybody. Ìgbà tí wọ́n débi tí wọ́n ti ń ṣe fàájì lọ́kọ ẹni tí wọ́n ń bò mọ́lẹ̀ lónìí. Ọ̀rẹ́ òun ti ní kó má gbọ́rọ̀ yìí fún ẹ, ṣùgbọ́n tó wọn bá gbé fún ẹ ọkàn wọn ò balẹ̀ o. Bó ṣe gbàṣírí fún ó gbàṣírí fún wọn. Wọ́n fẹ́ lù pa.
Òtúkà àbáṣáré jẹ́.
Wọ́n á dé mọ́lẹ̀ àbí bẹ́ẹ̀ kọ́.
Àwọn sọ̀rọ̀ fún yàn máa ń gbé ọ̀rọ̀ fún yàn ni, wọn kì í sọ fún yàn.
Tó ẹ̀rín láàárín ìtàn náà tí o lágbà lọ́mọdé, ẹ̀rín láàárín ìtàn náà tí o lákùnrin lóbìnrin, ẹ̀rín láàárín ìtàn náà tí o ẹ̀rín ní ẹ̀rín kò mí o, ẹ má ṣe bá mi jà, ẹ̀rín láàárín tá a fi ń tanná ọtí. Ṣọlá Yusuf ní orúkọ mi, obìnrin gbọ̀ngbọ̀ngbọ̀n bí ẹni tẹ̀pá òjé, àìtóní bá gbé ká má tóní bá wí, àìsí ìtóní bá wí ká má tóní bá gbé. ọmọ wọn nílé Olú Òkun nìbàdàn nílé Olúyọ̀lé. Ìbàdàn ni mí, Ìbàdàn ni mí nílé Olúyọ̀lé. Ọmọ arólú owó, ọmọ arólú omi, ọmọ òkè túlú igbó àsábàrí, ọmọ agbóruru níwájú ológun. Àsábàrí ò ní kọjá lógun, ò ní kọjó sànjó àlá. ọmọ bẹ́ẹ̀ kẹ́mi ní kẹ́kẹ́ máa dẹ́gbẹ̀rin ọkọ, kíkẹ́ta ìkẹ́ máa dẹ́gbẹ̀ndínlógún tí ọmọ arólú fi ń dógba lọ́kọ. Ìbàdàn ajórúkọ bí ẹni yìnbọn akọni, ibẹ̀ ni èmi kìíní ti wá. Mo kí yín o, ẹ kú dédé àsìkò yìí. Àárí bàbá amòye àṣà òsì pẹ́ ló kó bẹ́ẹ̀ ọ̀nà ló jìn, kódà á lógún ìṣẹ́jú tá a fi ń dúró dè wọ́n. Ẹ dákun gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ ẹ bá láago bàbá lọ́wọ́ ẹ bá ń pè wọ́n, kọ́mọ́ ṣe pé torí bàbá máa pẹ́ wọn ó tó sùn. Kánrin kése bí wọ́n ṣe ń ṣe màásì fún wọn nìbàdàn ni wọ́n mọ̀ ṣe fún wọn lÉkòó, ni wọ́n mọ̀ ṣe fún wọn níjẹ̀bú, gbogbo ẹ̀ bá ń bá wọn. Bẹ́ẹ̀ bá rí wọn ẹ sọ pé Yorùbá ti gbòde o, bá a bá sì rí tàgíìrì àwọn ò lè wò, àwọn náà ni àdúródè. Mo kí gbogbo ẹ̀yin amòye o tí ẹ ti wà níkàlẹ̀. Mo bẹ̀rẹ̀ látòrí bàbá l'Ógbómọ̀ṣọ́, Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ Ògbómọ lójúgun níbi tí a gbé jẹ̀ka ká tó wá mú kọ yangan. Ẹnjiníà àgbà mo kí yín ẹ kú déédé àsìkò yìí ẹ̀yin dà ààrẹ òṣèlú ẹ má fi ṣe hàn wá ẹ má àpamọ́ fún wa ojú yín dà. ṣé ẹ ń gbọ́ mi.
ojú mi rèé o ojú mi rèé o.
Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ ojú yín dà
Okay.
ẹ jẹ́ ká rojú yín o.
ṣé ẹ ò rí mi bẹ́ẹ̀ náà.
èmi ni mò ń wá yín n ó sì rí yín.
mo rò ṣé kò ń ṣe àwọn kí náà ń pè láptọ̀pù ìjẹ̀bú yẹn lẹ tún lò.
irọ́ tògbómọ̀ṣọ́ ni mo
tó bá jẹ́ ọ̀ríjínà ni ó yẹ kẹ́ ẹ ti rí mi.
Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ náà lò.
bàbá Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ ni mo lò kódà kábíyèsí kẹ́mi wọn ogun àwọn ni wọ́n fún mi jọ́tán.
mo dẹ̀ wá ń bẹ̀ yóò ti kábíyèsí fún yín.
ẹ ṣe jáde bọ̀dá bíi dókítà ọlọpọlọ.
tìjẹ̀bú darí kẹ́ má lò mọ́ ilẹ̀ ṣì ń lò.
mi dẹ̀ parọ́ rí.
Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́ tó gbómọ lójúgun ni mò ń lò. kápẹ́ o bàbá ẹ kí àwọn èèyàn ànífẹ́ lomi ìṣe yẹ kàn yọ̀ǹdù sí ẹfẹ́ mi náà lọ́wọ́.
a kí gbogbo ilé o a kú ọjọ́ ìsinmi òní o a ṣe púpọ̀ rẹ o a kú bójú ọjọ́ ṣe rí o a dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ Ọlọ́run pé òtútù ti ń lọ díẹ̀díẹ̀ so ooru ti mú díẹ̀díẹ̀ láyé wa ń bí.
a rí ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn èèyàn àmọ́ nǹkan tó dé.
bóyá campaign wa ni ò tó.
campaign yẹn náà lájà.
ó yẹ ká pé a ju nǹkan síta mọ́ bá a ṣe máa ń jù tẹ́lẹ̀. ẹ mọ̀ tẹ́lẹ̀ ọjọ́ Friday wọ́n á ti rí ìpè wípé tó ẹ máa bọ̀ bí báyìí o. ṣùgbọ́n
mo wá fẹ́ mú lábàá
bàbá ti
mo
wọlé.
fẹ́ dá lábàá pé tá a bá rí èèyàn tí wọ́n pé 15 ká mọ bẹ̀rẹ̀ àkúkú rí bàbá amòye náà bàbá amòye ń
wọ́n ti wọlé wọn kò gbé fóònù
wọ́n ti dé.
wọ́n ti wọlé.
èmi pè wọ́n gbé fóònù mi.
Good.
wọ́n láwọn ń sáré ìgbà yẹn wọ́n sì wọkọ̀ ní gbọ̀ngàn bẹ́ẹ̀ wọ́n ti dé sìn.
ṣé kíní náà wọ̀ kíákíá bus tàbí.
bí èrò ọ̀bá pọ̀ lónìí
ọkọ̀ tí wọ́n fún.
àbáwo lẹ lè rí mú wá tí èrò ọ̀bá pọ̀. dókítà ọlọ́pọlọ.
àbá ni pé kí gbogbo àwọn tó wà níbí kan sanwó fún mi kí n tó read my speech.
èmi tí ẹnìkan ẹ mọ give speech nítorí speech yín yẹn ti ó ṣe pàtàkì ju káwọn èèyàn ó mọ̀ wá lọ bí a ṣe ń retí àwọn èèyàn ẹ jẹ́ kí n.
àbá ni wípé tèrò ò bá pọ̀.
ẹ gbójú sókè díẹ̀ ẹ gbé kámẹ́rà yín sókè bàbá.
ẹ jẹ́ ń gbẹ́nu sí ẹ jẹ́ ń gbé àbíkú ọ̀gbọ́n ẹ jẹ́ ń gbẹ́nu sí.
ẹ gádùn sí jàre ẹ ṣe.
so àbá mi ní wípé tèrò bá pọ̀ débi pé a ò fẹ́ tẹ̀lé ètò tá a ti ṣe tẹ́lẹ̀ ohun tó bá ń lọ nílẹ̀ ní ilẹ̀ wa a lè sọ bó jẹ́ wákàtí kan ni kó má kà jẹ́ pé a kàn túká pé a ń lọ no bó jẹ́ wákàtí kan la máa lò ká sọ torí kò sígbà tí nǹkan tí ò sí tó ń lọ nílẹ̀ wa kò sígbà tá a rọ̀rọ̀ tó lọ́rọ̀ orílẹ̀-èdè wa tí kì í dẹ̀ ṣe ọ̀rọ̀ pé kákan ṣeré àwọn tó ní láárí gan tó ń lọ lórílẹ̀-èdè wa tó ń fẹ́ kí èèyàn dá sí.
ń tá a dá mi ẹ̀ lé ná pé a fẹ́ sọ̀rọ̀ lé lórí lónìí ohun tí a dá mi rẹ̀ lé ná lónìí ó ní wípé a fẹ́ sọ̀rọ̀ a fẹ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ ètò pàtàkì kan lórí bí ilẹ̀ Nàìjíríà ṣe bẹ̀rẹ̀ ìyẹn ni a fẹ́ sọ láàrin bàbá Adébóyè àti dókítà ọlọ́pọlọ bí ó bá ṣe wá jẹ́ pé ìyẹn ò ní ṣeé ṣe torí pé a fẹ́ kí ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn èèyàn ó jẹ àǹfààní níbẹ̀ bó bá jẹ́ pé àwọn èèyàn jẹ́ bàbá ní ṣe a máa mọ̀ but ẹja sì máa ṣe àwọn ìkéde pẹ́pẹ́pẹ́ lára ìkéde tí èmi ní tàbí tí a bá rí ẹni tí ó tún fẹ́ sọ̀rọ̀ lẹ́yìn tí mo bá ṣe ìkéde mi tán. Lára ìkéde tí mo fẹ́ mú wá sí etígbọ̀ọ́ yín, àwọn ọlọ́pàá ní New York wọ́n ya ọjọ́ kan sílẹ̀ fún adúláwọ̀, wọ́n ṣerú ẹ̀ rí. Wọ́n pè ní African Day ní New York City. Wọ́n fẹ́ fi sọrí adúláwọ̀. Lára tó wá jẹ́ kó ṣe pàtàkì ni pé ọmọ wa, èèyàn wa, ọ̀rẹ́ wa, Ọlọ́run tọ́ba Adéyẹmí Lacran, ó wà lára àwọn ọ̀tọ̀kùlú tí wọ́n fẹ́ dá lọ́lá, tí wọ́n fẹ́ yẹ́ sí, tí wọ́n fẹ́ pàtàkì rẹ̀, tí wọ́n fẹ́ kàǹkà rẹ̀ lọ́jọ́ náà lọ́hùn ní New York. À ń fi àsìkò yìí sọ fún gbogbo ẹ̀yin èèyàn wa tẹ́ ẹ bá wà ní New York wípé ẹ dákun ẹ tú jáde. Màá fi àdírẹ́sì ẹ̀ sí ojú ọpọ́n ní on the 22 tí í ṣe ọjọ́ Àlàmísì, Thursday. Ìjọ náà ni wọ́n máa ṣe ní New York. Ẹ dákun, wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ náà nù. Àwa Yorùbá kò sádúláwọ̀ míì tó kọjá Yorùbá, àbí 22 tí í ṣe ọjọ́ Àlàmísì, Thursday. 5:22 ní aago 5 ìrọ̀lẹ́. Kódà àwọn onílù tí wọ́n ń lọ ọbẹ̀ wọ́n ti pè mí pé ṣé mò ń bọ̀, wípé kí n forí àwọn onílù ilẹ̀ wa. Ṣé ẹ sì mọ̀ pé tí àwa Yorùbá bá lọ pẹ̀lú ìró àti bùbá wa, àwa lágbà òde níjọ́ náà lọ́hùn. Ẹyẹ méjì kì í jẹ́ àṣà. Nígbà tó sì jẹ́ pé ọmọ wa wà lára àwọn tí wọn ó dá lọ́lá, èmi mú wá bí àbá wípé kí àwọn èèyàn wa kí wọn ó tú yáyá, kí wọn ó jáde bí ọmọlúàbí, kájọ ṣe ètò náà níjọ́ náà lọ́hùn. Àkọ́kọ́ tán máa ṣe nìyí, gẹ́gẹ́ bí tí mo gbọ́, tí a bá fi ọ̀gbàgbà ara wa gbalẹ̀, nígbà tí wọ́n bá máa plan míì ní ọdún tí ń bọ̀, àwa ni wọ́n mọ̀ wá kiri kan tiẹ̀ tó plan. Ẹ dákun, ẹ jẹ́ kí a tú yáyá ká jáde tilé tòde láti darapọ̀ mọ́ ètò yìí níjọ́ náà lọ́hùn. Ẹni tó bá ní ìbéèrè ẹ lè bi mí, tàbí kí ẹ bi Ọ̀túnba, kẹ́ ẹ bi Ọ̀túnba Adéyẹmí Lacran. Èyí ọmọ ẹni ìkéde míì tó tún ṣe pàtàkì dáadáa. Bàbá nawọ́ sókè, bàbá kẹ́pẹ́ o.
Mo kàn fẹ́ mọ̀ bóyá wọ́n máa zoom ẹ̀.
Wọn ò sọ ti zoom fún mi o.
Torí tí wọ́n bá ṣe zoom, ṣé àádẹ́ ní link tí a fi lè máa wò from a distance?
Mi ò rí zoom nínú kíní tí wọ́n fi ránṣẹ́ sí mi.
ok ìbéèrè ni, so tẹ́ bá lè gbé ọwọ́ wọn.
Tí tá a bá wá rí di pé wọn ó zoom rẹ̀, màá jẹ́ kẹ́ ẹ gbọ́, màá sì gba link lọ́wọ́ wọn.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni, gbogbo ẹ ti wọ mú nísìnyí o.
Ó ti wọ mú òní ní ìjọsẹ̀ kan náà kọ́ ló kù báwọn.
Kò tiẹ̀ tọ́sẹ̀ kan.
Kò pọ́sẹ̀ kan mọ́ gan.
Today is 18.
20 kílẹ̀ pé.
22nd.
22.
Ọjọ́
mẹ́rin òní ni.
Yeah.
Kò pọ́sẹ̀ kan.
Anyway, ntẹ́ bá rí ẹ lè post ẹ̀ sí wa ní amúṣẹ́ṣe and whatever.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni, mo sì tún èmi náà màá sì tún gbìyànjú láti record ẹ̀ kájọ wá wò ó ní orí Yorùbá Gbòde lọ́jọ́ mẹ́jọ bẹ́lẹ́mi ò bá gbà.
Bẹ́lẹ́mi ò bá gbà.
tó èkejì ní ẹ̀kọ́ inú holiday ẹ̀kọ́nú summer fún school Yorùbá basic Yorùbá Gbòde máa ṣe Yorùbá basic fún àwọn ọmọ wa 10 hours each week ní June àti July. Ẹ dákun níbẹ̀ ọmọ yín ó láǹfààní láti kọ́ Yorùbá tí wọ́n lè mú lọ lé tí wọ́n lè máa fi sọ̀rọ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ tí ò tiẹ̀ gbọ́ rí rárá yóò mọ bá a ti kíni àti bá a ti béèrè ọ̀nà àti bá a ti ń sọ pé ebi ń pa mí nǹkan báyìí ni mo fẹ́ jẹ ṣé ẹ mọ̀ pé téèyàn bá ti lè sọyún àṣírí ti bò. Ẹ dákun ẹ fi ọmọ yín ránṣẹ́ kì í ṣọ̀fẹ́ ṣùgbọ́n kì í ṣe owó tó pọ̀ áìdà ọmọ tàbí ọmọ ẹ fi wọ́n ránṣẹ́ orí Zoom ni èdè àti àṣà Yorùbá la máa kọ́ wọn wákàtí 10 lọ́sẹ̀ níbi tọ́mọ bá ti fi 40 wákàtí kọ́ nǹkan náà ṣe mọ̀ pé ó yẹ kó lámì kó láka. Ẹ pè Yorùbá Gbòde nọ́mbà tẹ́ ẹ pè láti wádìí sí nípa eléyìí òun náà ni nọ́mbà tèmi gan tẹ́ ẹ máa pè òun ni kẹ́ ẹ pè. Kò jẹ́ bí ó ṣe jẹ́ ó jẹ́ bí ó ṣe lóhùn ó jẹ́. Ẹ ṣeun adúpẹ́
olóòtú
kẹ́pẹ́ sà kẹ́pẹ́ o.
wákàtí 10 tẹ́ ẹ sọ yẹn aago mélòó ni on a daily basis?
On a daily basis ó máa jẹ́ àwọn kan wà fún aago 4 sí aago 6 àwọn kan sì wà fún aago 10 sí aago 12 ètò bá bu kálukú ló máa mú ṣùgbọ́n ètí kálukú bá ti mú gúrùpù tó bá ti mú òun náà ló máa lẹ́ni yẹn máa dúró tì kò ní lè change
aago 4 sí aago 6.
bẹ́ẹ̀ ni àti aago 10 sí aago 12.
lóru.
Bàbá orúbó
aago
10 àrọ̀lẹ́ aago 10 àárọ̀ sí aago 12 ọ̀sán.
Okay. Mo fẹ́ irú information yẹn kí n lè bá àwọn tí mo máa fi lọ.
Flyer tí ẹ máa jáde máa send flyer sí gbogbo wa tẹ bá ti wá ń rí flyer yẹn ẹ máa bá wa post ẹ.
Yes. Okay, ẹ ṣeun.
Yes sir. So adúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ ẹlẹ́dàá bá a bá torí pé àwọn kan ò wá ètò pàtàkì tá a fẹ́ ṣe káwá mọ̀ ṣe kò dáa kò sì buyì kún àwọn kò yẹ kó gbò. Mo kí gbogbo yín ẹ̀yin èèyàn wa pé ẹ kú dédé àsìkò yìí mo kí bàbá Mòye mo kí wọn pé wọ́n kú dédé àsìkò yìí mo kí bàbá Bíyì Oyèfúlẹ̀ mo sì kí alàgbà ẹnjìníà àgbà bàbá lÓgbómọ̀ṣọ́ bàbá Oyètúndé Thomas ẹ kú dédé àsìkò yìí ẹ kú kó lè dáa tí gbogbo wa ń ṣe. Today I'm going to change a little bit because of what we are doing today, because we want many people to be able to benefit. We are going to do it for 4 weeks, but by the grace of God, we are going to market it more from Wednesday so people can be part of it. What we are talking about today is Nigeria and the beginning of Nigeria. Baba, welcome to this program. Baba, you are welcome.
Baba, wo ni?
Ẹ̀yin náà ni.
Okay. First of all, I want to apologize for coming late. I have a friend from the notorious city of Ibadan.
Very, very notorious.
Mm-hmm. And he called. He first sent a message while we were at Amusheshe meeting. I managed to jiggle. So once the Amusheshe meeting was over, I called back because he wanted to talk about things that are vital to us. So now I let him go, and I will have to call him back tomorrow. I've been mentioning his names around here a long time. Jibola Ogoshola used to be the chairman of the Punch newspaper. Punch, yeah, Punch. Anyway, we discussed Yoruba Gbode, we discussed Amusheshe, we discussed a number of things. So it's not I mean, the perspective to one need or one long about what we are doing here. That's the kind of thing we talked about. Anyway, let's go back to the topic tí olóòtú ní ká sọ. Òyìnbó ní ká sọ ní àbídí Ọlọ́run.
I think if we speak English, it's going to allow many people to benefit from it. Especially if we are able to put it on demand. That is what we are planning to do. We want to structure it so that when it is on demand, people will be able to ask for it. And we don't know who we are. There may be people who don't speak Yoruba.
Okay. So let's start then. By now, people who come to Yoruba Gbode often enough would have caught me saying things that I believe that we should say very often. In the beginning, oh, Jesus. In the beginning, we were sitting down, minding our own business the best way we know how, before people came from outside to explore our land and exploit our land and people. So when you talk about colonialism and we talk about Nigeria, all of those things are corollary. They are corollary to what we started experiencing a long time ago. The Yoruba have a proverb that says, Ele Lobe. That is, the person who has the handle of the knife controls its use. So colonialism, slavery, colonialism, all of those came out of being overpowered, if you like, by invading people who invaded our land and took advantage of our readiness to protect ourselves. By the time we knew what protection might look like, they were already in total control, and we were forced to be subservient. And I mean, it's not good for us to start a story from the middle. And because if you start from the middle, there's only so much that the middle will tell you without all of the antecedents that made that middle possible. So I will cut it quickly. We were invaded by people who had real economic reasons to invade us, even if they came with other items on their agenda, like the evangelization of their religious practice or the spread of their culture, or in fact, principally the evangelization of their religion or the spread of their culture became instrument for conquest, and for not so much physical conquest that happened, but emotional conquest. They needed to tell us that our ways of life weren't that good, that we didn't know God, and so on and so forth. That's how it happened. It happened from the two peninsulas at the tail of the Asian continent, the Arabian Peninsula and the European Peninsula. Those are the places where our invasions came from and that we have not recovered from. And I continue to repeat, because I learned it in a history book called Today Through Yesterday, that slavery or enslaving of our people began on the east coast of Africa, and any slaves they caught or they took were taken to a place, to an island called Zanzibar, and from Zanzibar to Iraq. That was way in the 1800s. I mean, what am I talking about? That was way 800 AD, at least. Perhaps before that, but became big by 800 AD. 800 AD now is a long time ago. And the consequences of our being captured and used and abused, and our own reaction to it, is the reason tá a fi bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí kọ́là. So that, if you see a young person who speaks your language but doesn't know what, and is on his way to Arabia and he escaped, where do you return him or her? Well, tó bá kọ́là lójú, tí làbá wà lójú ẹ̀, wọ́n á mọ family tó ti wá ẹbẹ̀ ni wọ́n máa dá padà sí. That was 800 AD. European slave trade did not begin until 1500. So you're talking about 700 years, the same period that Arabs dominated Southern Europe. So the story is that long, I mean, in the past, and our inability to fight back has been that long. So when Europe now was able to save itself, to drive the invaders, their land away, then they became familiar. They said to themselves, well, I want these black people that they were using to conquer and whatever, where did they get them from? And that's how they began to do discovery, expansion, and empire, sending out people like Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Francis Drake, and all of those other people to the world to see how they can, they will that never again will the European peninsula be dominated by an outsider. Au contraire, it is the European peninsula now that is going to find its way into the world and dominate them. And that happened by 1492. People were already spread out on the Atlantic, looking for ways to get to other parts of the world, especially that part of the world that they used to get to by land. They used to go from Europe by land to Asia. But because of the challenges that they had with Arabs, they had to find alternate routes. And that's how they came across the bulge, the west bulge of Africa, to the place we now call Ghana, places like Elmina and places like that. That's to see how to use their ship to cross the ocean to get to what they thought would be India. And eventually they got to America, but some of them continued around Africa to Cape of Good Hope, to Zanzibar, and eventually came up the Indian Ocean to other parts of Asia, and eventually to India, which was their goal, and so on and so forth. That is the preliminary thing. If we don't know that, or if we don't share that information, jumping into how Nigeria came to be will be difficult. And it will be almost meaningless. How did they get to you and what have you? We needed to know how long ago and under what circumstance we became prey by foreign predators. Now, in the years between, say, 1492 and 1808, intense enslavement of our people happened. It happened because once they got to America and discovered that they could not do the farming and the physical labor by themselves, and the people that they brought from Europe that they call indentured servants that they brought from Europe, they weren't able to do as much. Nor were the people they found there that they called Indians, because they thought those who came to America thought they had reached India, and which was not true. But those people were dropping dead with too much work. That's when the Reverend Father Bartholomew Las Casas appealed to the Holy Roman Empire to let them go and catch black people from West Africa, to bring them to America and use them as slaves to till the land, because they already saw us in Africa how hard we were working, how much energy we demonstrated, and how difficult it is for us to die of the diseases that Europeans brought to America. But that became a very, very big business, because some of the blacks that they already knew, that they already confronted in Europe, the so-called Fulanis and Tuaregs and Sua Arabs and what have you, they were close to them. So they used them. They used these people of Arabic stock that they already knew about for hundreds of years before they came to West Africa. They use them now as the middle people to help catch slaves and bring them to the seaport, let's say in Lagos. And principally, well, I can just use one example that all of us will know. It was a Fulani that caught Ajayi Crowther and his family and brought them to Lagos as slaves, the ones that they didn't kill. So Atibora born again. So from 1808 until 1900, all kinds of things happened in West Africa. They were now going to evangelize Christianity. They created schools in Sierra Leone where any slave they caught on the high seas were brought to Sierra Leone, because the British decided that they were going to stop slave trade. They weren't going to do it, and they weren't going to let anybody else do it, because it would give that somebody else an economic advantage. So they used their battleships. And so they created, among other things, the Fora Bay College. The Fora Bay College, the very first student in Fora Bay College was Ajayi, the same Samuel Ajayi Crowther that I referred to a few minutes ago. And that's how evangelization of Christianity, stigmatization, bastardization of our culture, and all of that stuff began. And that continued. It didn't help us that by 1804, the Fulani had sacked parts of Nigeria all the way up to Ilorin. And so we were in trouble. And then, whereas the British people stayed on the coast in Lagos, they always sent somebody in to see how much they could conquer the rest of the thing gradually. By 1861, the British had already decided that Lagos was going to be a colony of Queen Victoria, and they took over the authority of the Oba of Lagos, and imposed a colonial status. Colony, the first time that the word colony was applied to any part of what you now call Nigeria, it was in Lagos, and it was in 1861. Actions and interactions that they carried on, who was going to approach the Oba of Oyo, Aláàfin, or the Oba of Ìjẹ̀bú-Òde, Awùjalẹ̀, what they were going to do. And then they started Rusida, they started creating the same kind of aggression, intergroup aggression among people. So they supplied the Oyo people with instrumentality to conquer the other Yoruba people, and they also supplied those other Yoruba people from instrumentality to resist and that kind of thing. So that way you allow the people to waste their energy, then you can go in there and take over the control. And that's exactly what happened between 1808 and let's say 1886. 1885 was when they had controlled the North Territory until European countries had already demarcated what they call their spheres of influence. Now, so that the spheres of influence that they created for themselves would not lead to clashes between them, they had a Berlin Conference in 1880, 85, 86 to formally recognize. It was Bismarck that called that meeting, and all European people attended, and they decided to demarcate African territory into spheres of influence. I'm going to. It is the sphere of influence that includes us.
Bàbá gbogbo wa là ń gbọ́ yín po.
The sphere of influence that includes us is what you are now calling Nigeria, by and large. The sphere of influence that doesn't include us include the Gold Coast, which the British also had, the Ivory Coast, which the French had, the Togo and Dahomey, which I will explain a little bit later on, and Cameroon and whatever. In our immediate neighborhood, those were the spheres of influence for different people. The Germans had a piece of Cameroon. The Germans had a piece of Togoland, but how they lost that is simply because of the the First World War, and the League of Nations had to take German territory and divide it among the winners of the First World War, which is other parts of Europe. So Togoland, a piece of it was taken away and given to the British to administer with the Gold Coast. The other piece was to be administered by the French with French West Africa, which included Dahomey. Then you go to what we call Cameroon. It was a German territory. A piece of it was taken away from the Germans and given to the British to administer with what we call Nigeria now. And the other piece was taken away and given to the French to administer with what we call French Equatorial Africa. So then you go to the south, and you get to what we call Southwest Africa. You get to Southwest Africa is now called Namibia. You go around the Cape of Good Hope and go to the East Africa, and you get to Mozambique and what have you. So all of this to say spheres of influence. Spheres of influence in 1885. You don't call that colonialism. I mean, then what do you call it? In fact, colonialism already began with the slave trade. I mean, even the end of slave trade, they didn't pack up and leave us alone. They decided that, well, if they were not harvesting slaves from among us anymore, that is, overt slaves that they were taking to another land, why not make them slaves on their own land? That's how it began. But the part that most people think they know about is the naming. In 1900, just before 1900, the British decided that they wanted to name to give the sphere of influence a name. The River Niger, what they call the River Niger, which was not a name that we gave to the river, it was Mango Park, who in 1795 gave that river that name. We call it different names in our own part of the world. Odoya ni Yoruba, and some people call it Kwara. Some people call it all kinds of things, but principally, Niger is a Latin word for black. Niger. In fact, it's also a Spanish word. In fact, it's the reason that people in this country, United States, that black people they brought in here were called Negro. Negro, Niger, all of those are various vernacular words for black in Latin Europe. Niger area is what occurred to them as a name to give to what you now call Nigeria, Niger area. So they created protectorates. Because of the expanse of land, they created a northern protectorate of Nigeria and a southern protectorate of Nigeria. Yoruba country belonged, of course, in the so-called southern protectorate. Later on, they split the southern protectorate into two, east and west, and so on. So that was 1900. January 1, 1900, the name Nigeria came into use as the name of protectorates created by the British on their sphere of influence. Check with me. Now, as time went on, management, of course, we had the luck that Ajayi Crowther, Reverend T.B. Macaulay, and a whole bunch of other people, when they eventually became evangelists of Christianity, they came home to evangelize Christianity in their own land. Reverend T.B. Macaulay was, like Ajayi Crowther, they came from Sierra Leone. He married Ajayi Crowther's younger daughter, Abigail. He married Abigail, and they had a baby called, the Baba Gbomosho, because the Macaulays were, as Yoruba people, they were from Ogbomoso. The marriage resulted in a baby called Oladipo. Of course, in those days, when you get baptized, they give you a European name, biblical or not. Ajayi Crowther chose the name Samuel Crowther when they were making him when they were baptizing him. And about Chibi Macaulay, Thomas Babington Macaulay was named after some famous person in England. When they had Oladipo, they also gave him Herbert Samuel Healers, Heelas, Herbert Samuel Healers Macaulay. Oladipo nìyẹn o. But principally, I'm bringing about Macaulay in because of the role that Macaulay played between 1900 and 1944. Ojú ẹ̀ ti là kọjá tàwọn òbí ẹ̀. So he was a person trying to help mollify the abuse that the creation of Nigeria, so to speak, visited on us. And that's why in 1922 he founded a political party, so to speak, to defend us. He was also representing the Oluwa of Lagos on a land deal in the Privy Council and all of that. So he had studied in England, surveying and engineering, and he was one of the few people who could speak English very well. When I say few, I'm talking about people who are doing it without being subservient to the British Crown. And that continued. He formed political parties, he formed movements. In 1944, he helped to found the National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon. Notice that Cameroon was already part of the British sphere of influence. It was part of the Southern Protectorate. And so when Abba Macaulay was founding this organization called Nigerian Council, the National Council, NCNC, National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon, in 1944. It wasn't long after he founded it, they were campaigning in northern Nigeria, spreading the news of what they were founding, and that's where Abba Macaulay died. And that's when Nnamdi Azikiwe, the secretary of NCNC, became the president of NCNC. And meanwhile, NCNC was very popular in the Southern Protectorate. That's Omowalu Dale. That is almost Southern Protectorate, Dale. So almost everybody in the South was a member of the NCNC, and they were spreading it to the North. And the North was also buying it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, or both, Nnamdi Azikiwe in 1948 said that the God of Africa, after Macaulay died, and all the instrumentality of governance of the movement of the NCNC came into his hand, he said the God of Africa has created the Igbo, as we call them at that time, to take the children of Africa out of bondage. The domination of Nigeria, indeed Africa, by the Igbo race is a question of time. Check, Bobby. So that was the speech he made in 1948, where at a meeting of Igbo State Union where he was president of Igbo State Union, and his presidential address, he said that this is the same guy who was persecuting Awolowo and I cannot forget it, Akiola Maja and other people for founding Egbe Omo Yoruba in England. Before that, years after Igbo State Union had existed, and calling them tribalists, he was the head of the Igbo State Union, and calling anybody else who formed anything after that a tribalist. But I want you to remember that having said that, it was not without reaction from other people, especially when the very next year, I'm trying to remember his name, another Igbo guy said something repeating what Azikiwe said at a bar. But a more serious reaction came from Malam Aminu Kano, who was also a member of, guess what, NCNC, because all of the, if you were anybody in Nigeria in those days, Omawalo Shekini, you must go along. But when he heard Azikiwe say that, he went back to the north and helped to found the Northern People's Congress. And but Aminu Kano was Hausa, pure and simple. Mambele. So the Fulani oligarchy would not allow a Hausa to be the leader of a movement of that nature, and that's why the prince, what's his name, Amadu Bello, the Sardauna of Sokoto, used the power influence of Fulani to take the NPC away from Aminu Kano. But Aminu Kano was nothing else if not stubborn. He immediately founded another party, Northern Elements Progressive Union, NEPU. So by 1951, we had a number of parties. Awolowo and Co. already founded the Action Group. Egbe Omo Yoruba was not a political party. NCNC, ALA, Abat Macaulay was not a political party. It was an independence movement. But once the British said that we had to form political parties in 1951 for the first election that would be allowed nationwide, then NCNC, Azikiwe tried to convert NCNC to a political party, an independence movement that welcomed all people all across Nigeria, became a political party. It was a very smart move on his part, because he would just say, well, NCNC Gbode, we Yoruba Gbode. And that's how Awolowo and Co. say, no, gbogbo NCNC tó wà ní, I'm speaking Yoruba, all the NCNC people in Western don't necessarily subscribe to the political agenda of Nnamdi Azikiwe and so on, and therefore we must found a political party to which they can all subscribe. And that's how the Action Group was founded in 1951. By 1954, the Constitutional Conference was now debating what kind of Nigeria do we want, because Azikiwe played his way to make sure that Lagos, which was part of Western region before 1954, that it was not allowed to continue as part of Western region. So he got all other people around him, including MPC and Co., to create Lagos as the capital of Nigeria, the Nigeria that we are talking about now. It was part of Western region before. That's among the outcomes of the 1954 convention, Constitutional Conference. Another outcome of that conference, Awolowo and a number of other people who are concerned about the aggressive representation of the NCNC with respect to other groups in Nigeria. They were saying, look, there's more to this your Nigeria than Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. Suppose a region wants to break away from this Nigeria, we should write it in the constitution that they have the right to go back to who they were, as opposed to a constitution that says once this is done, that's when Azikiwe got up and fought it, and they were given 2 days to go and prepare formally to come and make their representations. Awolowo made his representation formally. The secession clause ought to be in the 1954 Constitution that created Nigeria as a federation. As he will give a rebuttal. I mean, when I read the rebuttal today, I know how we got into the mess we got into, not only as Yoruba, but as Africans. I mean, all the examples that Azikiwe gave about federations were federations of homogeneous people, ignoring the fact that our own peoples, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, had existed for millennia without homogenizing. But essentially in 1954, Nigeria became a federation. Lagos was excised from Western region, and the rest is history. Now, the Nigeria you want me to talk about, I think I may have talked about it, but not in the way, perhaps not in the way that has been shared with the rest of us. Nigeria has not always existed. And this year is 2025. So we are talking about at most 125 years of British imposed territory that nobody ever signed on. All the lies about the Alaafin Oyo and this and that, signing something, there is no document that says Alaafin Oyo gave his authority to anybody to do whatever.
Thank you, Baba. If I may come in a little bit to, if you're just coming in, everybody, good afternoon again, or good evening, or good morning, whatever the time is with you. This is Yoruba Gbode, and that was our Baba Amoye, Professor Adeniran Adeboye, enlightening us, giving us this knowledge that we always crave on the beginning of Nigeria. Like I said, it's going to be a series. We are going to talk about it from the beginning. Baba started talking about it from the beginning. I will give our people opportunity, because this topic is so important. It's very, very important to me. I don't want us to just rush it without getting something valuable from it. So I'm going to allow questions because Baba has talked for more than 30 minutes here. Yeah. So I'm going to allow question, but before I allow question, Dr. Biyi Oyefule is going to talk about some important aspect that happened before Nigeria came together officially. So that and Baba's lecture, we're going to put it together, and I will give us opportunity to ask questions. Baba, you haven't finished, right?
Show me. No, I can pause now. Let me pause.
Okay. So if you pause, then you can come back later. But we are not saying you.
Oh yes, I mean, the only other thing I was going to say to prove that we did not surrender anything to anybody.
Okay, go ahead.
How about Hilas Macaulay, grandson of Samuel Ajayi Crowther, found himself in Ibadan, trying to get people to understand what was working against them and what have you. The British district officer in Ibadan approached him and said he had to go back. Now, let me tell you what the British officer said. He said, the Olubadan does not want to see you here. how in the world does an Englishman know that Olubadan, a Yoruba-speaking Oba, and Herbert Macaulay, a Yoruba-speaking citizen, cannot come to Ibadan and share information with the Olubadan? No, they ran him out. So all I'm saying is that whatever they did with the Olubadan, whatever they did with the Alaafin Oyo, whatever they did with the Ooni of Ife, whatever they did with Awujale of Ijebu-Ode, whatever they did with anybody in there, Irogbu, they did not. It's not like those people volunteered opinion, agreed to something. All of the things that we experienced were imposed by treachery. Okay, let me shut up there because I'm sure Dr. Olopolo Pipe will be able to expand on that because he has data about what happened to Alaafin in the 1880s.
Okay. So I have the honor to call Baba Olopolo,
Olopolo Pipe.
Well, we can debate that, Baba Olopolo Pipe, but if we are talking about Baba according to his job, what Baba does is not only with Olopolo Pipe. Baba deal with people that Opolo wọn ò pé a lot of times to make sure pé Opolo wọn pé.
Okay.
Ọ̀rọ̀ burúkú tó ń tẹ̀rín ẹ jẹ́ kí n sọ eléyìí kó tó di pé ẹ lọ ṣé ẹ mọ̀ pé ẹnu mi a máa fẹ́ já wáyà gbà mí wọ́n ń ṣàdúrà fún oníbàbà anyway ẹ jẹ́ n fi pamọ́ ẹ̀ ń so Kẹ́mi Ọlágùn go ahead.
Well, speaking in English, ẹ kú ìjókòó gbogbo ilé o. Now turning to vernacular, I will say that what Baba's last two or three statements was right on the money. The treaty signed by Alaafin in 1888 did not include Ekiti. It did not include Ijesha. It did not include Ondo. It did not actually include Ijebu, even though some have seen a version of that treaty that called the Jabu, Jabu, Jabu country as part of it. But I think it's, again, one of the lies and confabulations done by the Britishers. The Britishers are masterminds in falsifying stories and falsifying history. We must keep that in mind. That treaty of 1888 was in which they described Alaafin as the Oba of the Yorubas, the head of the Yorubas. The Yoruba was actually restricted to around Oyo area, Iseyin, Awe, and the rest of them. But as far as I know, it's not what we call Yoruba land today. I just need to have that known by people. And yes, Alaafin Alowolodu Adeyemi the first did sign it, but he signed it with an X. So we don't know whether it was the Alaafin himself who signed X or somebody put an X there. And the way of my own research of the colonial Britishers suggests to me that it's highly possible that the Alaafin might not have signed. Somebody might have put the X there for him. So we'll wait for future historians to help us delineate and determine the extent of the fakery and treachery of the Britishers. Having said that, in support of what Baba just said, I will list two different events that occurred in Yoruba land that is of interest and it's of importance to our understanding of Yoruba history. After slavery was made illegal, was outlawed in 1807 by the Britishers. That's probably one of the best things Britain will ever be known for. And those of us who are students of history will always appreciate that fact that it was the Britishers, as bad as they were, who actually outlawed slavery. See, after slavery, 1807, Britain extended a lot of its own resources to making the trade non-lucrative in the slaving areas of Africa. What they did was they tried to supplant rather, not supplement, they tried to supplant slave trading with legitimate trade in palm oil, in cocoa, and some other um, items that could easily be grown by the people. And it's in the attempting to suppress slave trade, which is good, and encourage trade, that most of the things that happened in the second part of the 19th century took place. And that's the only way we can fully understand it. Going to Lagos, in 1861, Lagos was annexed, was made into a colony of Britain. Now, one will want to ask, why is that so? But if one understands that the trade that was going on at that time is what actually induces the Britishers into turning Lagos into a colony. There might be other reasons, but access to trade was a major reason that we can decipher. You see, in 1851, I think it was, actually in 1841, Akitoye, who was the youngest son of Ologun Kutere, Oba Ologun Kutere of Lagos, ascended the throne of Lagos. He was severely warned not to allow Kosoko to come into Lagos, keep him at Ekpe where he was. But unfortunately, he allowed him, and Kosoko fought him, and Kosoko was later crowned the king of Lagos after his nephew. After his uncle. Kosoko, when one uses not age, but who was born to who. Kosoko, who is much younger than Kosoko, who was much younger than Akitoye, actually is an uncle to Akitoye. If you understand that.
Yeah, in polygamy, it happens.
Yeah. So Akitoye, the son of Ologun Kutere, became king, like I said, in 1841. By 1845, Kosoko, his older nephew, had supplanted him. And Kosoko, the difference between Akitoye and Kosoko was this. Akitoye was a peaceful man who believed much more in what was then legalized trade, palm oil, cocoa, and what have you. But Kosoko, on the other hand, was a rascal. He was a slave trader. He would go throughout the length and breadth of the area where he lived to get slaves to sell to the white man. Now, Britain was in Nigeria trading, and they wanted to suppress slave trade and encourage trading in other commodities. So naturally, they would have formed an alliance with Akintoye, who was a non-slaver, against Kosoko, who was a slaver. So here's a situation where the non-slaver whom they wanted was king. And this non-slaver was supplanted by a slaver whom they didn't want. And this occurred between 1845, I think. Kosoko became king. And by 1951, there was a war. And the British people were kind enough to support Akintoye, the non-slaver, against the slaving Kosoko. And finally, by 1851, after about 6 years on the throne of Lagos, Kosoko was kicked out by Akintoye with the help of the Britishers. And he wasn't there until 1851 when he came in until 1853. However, on January 1st, 1852, a treaty with Britain to finally abolish slave trade in Lagos was signed by Akintoye. And this treaty was of very great importance. So it was that treaty of 1852, January 1st, 1852, that caused Lagos, the Britishers, and the French on the western part, on the western aspect of Lagos in Dahomey, to have this type of very intense relationship. So that intense relationship, which includes suppressing slave trade, encouraging legitimate trade, finally led to the annexation of Lagos as a colony in 1861. And this was way before the partition of Africa of 1884, 1885. But around the 1860, 61, or even earlier than that, there had been a lot of push between all the European powers, mostly French and English, to assert their dominance in that area because of the lucrative trade they could conduct in that area. And that 1861 treaty, the 1861 annexation that made Lagos into a colony, in a way also led to the 1888 treaty with Alaafin Alowolodo up North Country in Oyo. It also, in a way, led or influenced the 1892 war, the first war the British would actually fight in that area between them and the Ijebu at a place called Imagbon, and it's still called the Imagbon War. So all those things, they connect, they relate to each other in very visible ways. So 1861, Lagos is now a British colony. To the local people, it's called Èkó Federal. Èkó Federal. Not quite federal, but Èkó Federal. And that's the situation on and on until other parts of Nigeria, or what would later become Nigeria, were included into the colony. I'm going to stop there with the annexation of Lagos. And I think I should jump, if Olotu wants me to, jump into the British invasion of Benin Kingdom in 1897. Would you want me to do that? Olotu,
bẹ́ẹ̀ náà mi ò sùn oorun kẹ̀ tẹ́ bá fẹ́ rójú mi kẹ́ fi lè tẹ́ bá fẹ́ rójú mi, ọ̀rọ̀ yín ló gbé mi lọ rẹpẹtẹ. Tẹ́ bá wá fẹ́ máa rójú mi lóòrèkóòrè, ojú mi rèé. If you can do that too, so that we just finish that part. Thank you,
right.
Sir.
The attack on Benin was a most unfortunate event that occurred in the Bight of Benin, Lagos area. The immediate trigger for that invasion was an unfortunate event that occurred the year before. You see, the issue of 1897 was directly related to the killing of James Phillips, who was an acting consul general of that area. See, the acting consul general, had led a party of about, I think, 250 people, which included British officials, African porters, African servants, to Benin on January 4th, 1897. Phillips and his party were ambushed near a town called Guato in part of Edo territory. And that resulted in the death of all the people in that party, with the exception of two British survivors, and I think I can't quite remember the number of the Chekiri porters carrier who went along with them. You see, the fellow, this Phillips fellow, had gone into Benin. He wanted to go talk to Oba of Benin, of Orave. Now, to show the level of arrogance, the lack of respect for the autonomy of a sovereign nation, that act itself demonstrated that amply. Philip had sent a message to England that he was going to visit the Edo king, Edo Oba. He didn't get a reply back from England to authorize him to go. However, while after writing the request, before getting the reply, he had sent a messenger to Edo Kingdom, to the Oba, that he wanted to come and visit him. And the Oba sent a message back that there's a very important celebration called the Egwe celebration, during which he, the Oba, cannot see anyone, and he cannot do any state affair that is unrelated to that spiritual celebration. But this rascal named Phillips went anyway, and that showed how the utter lack of respect, the utter disregard he
Yes,
had for. Hello?
I'm
Yeah,
going. Please go
you.
ahead.
Okay. And that demonstrated to me the level of the amount of disregard he had for a sovereign nation and the sovereign Oba. So he got wiped out, he got killed. So in response to this attack, the British Admiralty appointed Admiral Harry Rawson to lead a second force to invade the Kingdom of Benin. This military operation, I think they officially called it the Benin Punitive Expedition, started shortly after on February 9th, 1897. And they had about 1,200 men, 1,200 military men, both naval, both land army, that went into Benin. Well, these guys were not carrying bows and arrows, and they were not carrying spears or swords. In which case, if they had, there's no way on God's earth for them to even have have defeated the Edos. But they have a magazine guns. They had their very powerful machine guns. So they were able to defeat they were able to defeat the Oba and the Oba's army. You see, prior to that fight, the Oba of Benin was actually the only monarch, the only sovereign entity that could be counted on, that could be viewed as a respected entity. And I don't know, remember earlier during the time when I was talking about Lagos and Kosoko and Akintoye, everything the British stood for was for trade. They only came to trade, not to preach Christianity, which they did, as long as it led to successful trading. Not to get to know the people; those they don't care. They don't care much about if it will lead to successful trading, and that's all they were worried about. And even some people have suggested possible humanitarian motivation that drove the action of Britain. For instance, the Egwe Festival, for instance, there were human sacrifices done. And some people had mentioned that the British, Philip, who got vanquished earlier, went there to prevent the Oba from doing a lot of sacrifices. But to me, that's BS. He
It
will
is.
not. He will not just go to protect the people of Edo. I think it was still this trade issue that got him to still want to go there. And anyway, fast forward to 1897. The second punitive force came in with its 1,200 soldiers and naval personnel, and they unfortunately defeated Ovorave Nugbaisi, who was the Oba of Benin at that time. And I'm going to, one quick second, I'm going to interrupt.
Dókítà, we can't hear you again.
No, you cannot hear me because I muted myself. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So the defeat was horrible, and all the carvings, carvings and artistry and artistic work of the Edo were carried off to be auctioned in Europe, to be auctioned all over Europe. But most of them ended up in Germany, but that's where that is. Now, the Oba himself was Oba Ovorave was exiled, and he finally died in exile in 1914. So those two issues, the punitive war, the punitive expedition against the Benins, the annexation of Lagos many years later in 1861, were two pivotal events that, unless one fully understands them and understand how it happened, one may not fully understand, one may not fully appreciate how the Britishers got into Nigeria. Back to you, Luchi.
Thank you so very much. Our two great speakers. Koríko odò kì í ṣe ẹgbẹ́ làbẹ́làbẹ́. Abidi ò ṣe é wé Kùránì, wàláì ò ṣe é wé Ọlọ́run. Thank you so much. We are very, very grateful. If you're just coming in, this is Yoruba Gbode, and we're learning before Nigeria. What happened? Before Nigeria, there were many things, and that is what we are learning today. If we want to fight, we must have the background knowledge. We can't just be shouting, we want Yoruba nation. What happened before Yoruba nation? Thank you, Ojare Baba Adeniran Adeboye and Dokita Olopolo. We have to know. I'm very, very grateful. I'm very, very happy for this knowledge. So where we are now, we are going to ask questions. And I don't know whether Baba wants to add anything before I go to question. Baba Adeboye.
I want to thank Dr. Olopolo Pique for the details that he supplied. And I want to not so much challenge his interpretation, but to take away any credit that the British did not earn. Yes. The end of slave trade, it was William Wilberforce in England, in British Parliament, who moved the motion to end slavery. Let us look a little bit at what was happening here in Americas during that period. The Industrial Revolution. Remember that America was essentially part of Europe before the so-called independence. The Industrial Revolution that happened between the beginning of slavery and 1807 made slave trade no longer profitable, because the Industrial Revolution had replaced some of the things that you do with physical labor of the slaves by machinery. So as far as Europe was concerned, especially as far as England was concerned, if they were going to be having profits from business, from their enterprise, it wouldn't profit them as much to continue with slave trade as with trading in commodities. For example, cocoa is a product of Brazil. Cocoa didn't grow anywhere else but Brazil. So to bring cocoa beans to West Africa and see where it will grow and how they will harvest and make chocolate and whatever it is was very important. It was going to be more profitable than slave trade. And you could continue mentioning other things. For example, many Yoruba may not know that cassava does not belong to our land. It was brought from the south, from the Americas, and planted because they already tested this well and saw that it will grow in our land. So agricultural products were important now to beating, and that's why they had to end the slave trade and substitute for it trade in commodities that they could monitor and that didn't involve so much expenses and but had the promise of so much profit. So I'm not saying that there did not exist in Britain people who had the make of human kindness in them, but they were not the ones who ruled the day. Economy. Is economy stupid? Economy was the reason that slave trade had to be put to death, and the resources of England, in terms of military, naval, and what have you, were put or the high seas immediately to make sure that slavery did not continue, so that they could have room for what the so-called free trade that we have now. So I'm not in a position to say there weren't kind people. I don't know where they were for 300 years, but something that speaks, capitalism speaks louder than voice, it was the real motivation to underscore that. The slave ships that they were using before the slave trade formally ended, not factually, but formally. The East India Trade Company, that was the company that they founded to replace the slave trading company. Later on, they found United Africa Company from the Royal, they founded the Royal Niger Company after the East India Trade Company. Then they founded, at least in the case of Tubman Goldie, they founded the United Africa Company as a successor to the Royal Niger Company. So all of these things are responding to changes that capitalism dictated. Now, the end of the former end of slave trade did not mean the end of slave trade. It just gave slave trade was going to end if and when the British were able to totally stop it. And that continued, slave trade continued even until the 20th century, splitting people in and out and what have you. So that much I can add to what I said before. The success of the British in destroying Benin gave them big confidence. Even though what do you call the thing? The establishment of northern and southern protectorates of Nigeria in 1900 was going on, they still lacked the confidence to see whether they could actually have Nigeria, what would I call Nigeria, together as one territorial unit. I wonder if the death of Oba Overami Lugbaisi in 1914 was a reason to immediately declare amalgamation of the protectorates into one big territory. I don't know the facts, but it's just like a coincidence that Lugbaisi died in 1914, and right away, the amalgamation of the protectorates occurred. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Baba. Thank you. A ó máa rí yín bá. If you are just coming in, we are on Yoruba Gbode. It's an important topic. Before Nigeria, what was going on? I'm going to open the microphone for questions on what we have talked about, because sometimes if we say too much, then we won't know what we know or what we want to know. We are going to ask questions, but tí wọ́n bá fún wèrè lọ́kọ́ ló máa roko sí. I'm going to start by asking my own question to our two noble professors. The question is, The Benin people, are they Yoruba? Is an important question that people people argue about it all the time. Are they Yoruba? The Benin people, Edo ṣé Yoruba ni wọ́n? Ṣé orírun wọn ṣé Yoruba ni? It's controversial. We don't know which is which. Ẹ ṣé.
I can answer
that. Okay.
I can give an answer to that if you want me to.
Okay. Go ahead,
The
Baba.
Edo King Oba is a Yoruba man. And he's always been a Yoruba man on as far back as Oromiyan and Iweka. They are all Yoruba. So, but the Benin people, the Edo people, if one were to do a linguistic analysis of that language, a glottochronological analysis of Benin language, of Edo language, we find out that it may belong to a core group of languages. It may belong to the Niger-Congo group of languages, but it is not Yoruba language. I personally I'd argue with people in the past that Edo was Yoruba. But the more I was in Benin, while I was in Benin, the more I do my own critical analysis of the people, I came to the conclusion that it's highly likely that they are not Yoruba people, even though their kings and the chiefs that came in with the Romeo, despite the fact that those ones were actually Yoruba. But it seems unlikely to me that the Edo people themselves are Yoruba. And of course, we've been together for a long time, so from all points of view, we should view each other as brothers and sisters. But glottochronologically, their language does not reflect Yoruba language.
Baba Adeboye, ó kàn yín o.
Well, I agree with Professor Oyefule that the Oba of Benin is a Yoruba, or the dynasty. The reason is that before the Oba, there was a problem in the Edo kingdom. They could not choose their next leader, their next Ogiso. So they appealed to the Oni of Ife to send them somebody to help quieting the. I mean, there was crisis all over the Edo kingdom. So, in order to settle the crisis, they were going to get somebody sent by the Arole Odua to settle the kingdom, and they sent Oramiyan. So Oramiyan went to Benin, and upon getting there, he showed his hand about wanting to settle the place and to give them a permanent solution. His position in Benin was not Ogiso, the title of the leader of Benin or Edo people before he came. He chose a name that he brought from Yoruba country, Oba. So as long as you continue to call the head of traditional government in Benin Oba, you are essentially saying that that title came from Yoruba country and has remained. Nobody has called anybody in Benin Ogiso since Oromia went in there. But Oromia was successful in calming down the crisis in Benin. He had married a local Benin girl when he got in there, and they had a baby. And as they were having the baby, and he stayed longer and longer, things became more and more peaceful. But the day that the baby was born, he was so happy that he could stay in Benin and marry one of the girls and have a baby. And he says now, Owo Eka, Owo Reka, that is, the babies
He can handle it.
can handle it. That's what became Eweka. So the only ruling family in Benin today, which is what more than you can say for other cities in Western region, there's only one ruling family in Benin, and that's the Eweka. That's the Eweka family. All the others of Benin, Oban Monzo, Yokisogiso, have been descendants of Oweka. So, principally, yes, nobody is contesting that Eweka is a descendant of Oromia. What they are contesting, or what some of them are contesting, is that the reason that Benin was able to send a message to Ife to get somebody to come and rule them was because a Benin person who had offended the city ran away to, or who had offended the city was exiled, and he found his way to Ife. They call it a Kalidaran. I mean, I never heard of a Kalidaran until about 10, I mean, maybe say 25 years ago. But no Oba of Benin before now was going to dispute that he was a descendant of the people we call Yoruba. Now I'm going to come back to the people we call Yoruba because they've not always been called Yoruba. But when you are analyzing the language of the Benin people and comparing it to the language of the Yoruba, it's a difficult job because the Yoruba, the people we call Yoruba today, they themselves are coming from very many directions. There are statements that Urudua himself came from the north of Ife. When you look at the map, the part of the north they would have been talking about is you are going in the direction of the so-called Nok NOK culture. When you go all the way from Lagos to Lokoja, you will see how related the languages are, Igala, Igbira, and all of those things. And those Igala and Igbira are sitting squarely on top of the Benin territory. But they speak languages that are mutually intelligible with Yoruba. So we shouldn't spend too much time on that because all over the world, there hasn't been a clean boundary between two people who think that they are distinct. Today, right there in the Middle East, Arabic language is not really a language, it's a collection of dialects. And many times they are not even mutually intelligible, yet they are all called Arabs. In England, you have Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, and what have you. They don't all speak English. On the continent itself, you will remember that the Battle of Hastings, 1066, is what moved a whole bunch of people, Anglos and Saxons. When I say Anglo, I'm not speaking well. Angles, that's what they call them, and Saxon, who moved from Europe and from Europe, Germanic-speaking people who moved from Europe to England with the Battle of Hastings. If you go to France, in the area called Alsace, that's the boundary more or less between Germany and France. Germany is a German speaking. Okay, let me be careful here. France is a Latin country. In fact, in France, in Paris today, you will still see places in Paris that are called quartiers latins, that is Latin quarters. They are Roman, what do I say here? They are Romance language people like Spanish and Portuguese and Italian and Romanian and whatever. So all those languages are connected. I am a witness to one thing. The mathematics that I have to read, much of the latest or the earliest writing of mathematics, much of it was done in Europe. The moment that I could read French mathematics, I could read practically anything in Portuguese and the Portuguese mathematics, Spanish mathematics, Italian mathematics. I could read with understanding. In other words, those languages are connected. Are they the same language? No. Remember that language gets solidified with communication. In fact, the original languages of European Peninsula was Celtic. So I would say that at the end of the day, it's how people feel about each other. But when you are talking about vocabulary wars, there is no doubt that the Oba of Benin is of Yoruba origin, because when you look at the Oriki, Oriki, I mean, I'm not surprised that I'm related as much to people of Kwara as I am to people of Ogun, because Oriki, if I go too far, either you are the Oriki of my father or my mother or their father or their mother or their grandfather or their grandmother, you end up belonging to practically every part of Yoruba country, because your parents married from everywhere. So there is Ijebu blood, there is this. So, but let's be honest now. If Dr. Olopolopipe decides to speak pure Ijebu around me, I may not be able to make it. And here we both call ourselves what? Yoruba. Now let me come back to Yoruba
But
itself.
Dr. Olopolo ò tiẹ̀ mọ̀ Ìjẹ̀bú sọ ná.
Okay. Well,
Rẹ́mọ ni wọ́n ń sọ. He speaks
okay.
to Rẹ́mọ and people in Ife can understand him.
But let's go to the word Yoruba itself. The one version of the word Yoruba goes as follows. Oyo was a dominant empire. Nobody doubts that. And the Aláàfin was a very powerful person in that domain. And that domain was very big. But the Ekiti and the Ijesha, who felt the pressure of the presence of Oyo Empire and at least emotionally wanted to resist it, they noticed how the people of Oyo Empire did any and everything that their Oba, that their life wanted. So they called the people, what they allow Oyo Eru Oba. Yoruba was supposed to be an insult to the people of Oyo Empire, who, when the Alaafin says jump, they will say, how high? Shengbomi. That is one version of how the word Yoruba got into use. It's an insult from Ijesha, Ijebu. No, not, I don't know about Ijesha and Ekiti people, thinking of the people in Oyo Empire, in Oyo Kingdom, as Eruoba. But, well, Eruni Baba, when Ajayi Crowther was now asked to translate the Bible into his own language, or when he volunteered to do it, the only language that he could present to people was Yoruba, because they had accepted Yoruba as the language, because by insult or by whatever it is, the word Yoruba itself had come to stay in Oyo Kingdom or Oyo Empire. So it is an irony of fate that the instrument that will be used to teach us to read and write is the version of our language that had been stigmatized as the language of Oyo, Eru, Oba. Let me be quiet there. Wait for questions and contests of points.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Baba. Dr. Yefule, I thought I saw your hand up.
Oh, no, let's
okay.
find out.
Now, writers, authors, and sometimes we get enlightened by some. We get confused by some. This book. Mo fẹ́ jọ bàbá ni wọ́n máa ń mú textbook wá kó lè bá yé wa dáadáa. This is History of Africa by only The Quest for Eternal Harmony by Molefi
Ashanti.
Ashanti. Now, it started by writing about Benin, the two types of Benin that we have. People in Cotonou, and we have some people Benin, Nigeria. Listen to this. Of Benin based its legitimacy on the claim that he was a direct descendant of Oodua, the founding ancestor of the Yoruba. That's the Oba of Benin. He based his legitimacy on that claim. So there was no greater legitimacy in the realm than to be a direct descendant of Oodua. Hence, the close relationship between Edo and the Yoruba. So technically, it's saying that the Edo are not Yoruba. Is that what I can find there?
The Edos are not Yoruba. Ulochu, Edos never call themselves Yoruba. They are not Yoruba. Their language is not Yoruba language. During the time of the empire, the Benin Empire became so large, one of the largest in West Africa. It can even rival that of Oyo Empire of old. Even at that time, they never called themselves Yoruba, but they will respect a Yoruba king. The reason they did
not. But now, my next question is, the Oba came from Yoruba land, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if in Benin, if they have what they call, there's something that, okay, if they have hereditary monarchy or primogeniture.
Yeah.
Okay. So it means their Oba is Yoruba.
Yes.
Even though they are not Yoruba, but anybody who reigns there is a Yoruba because the first person that was brought was a Yoruba, and they have hereditary monarchy.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Case closed. Thank you so much.
Remember, Odotu, it does
Yes,
not
sir.
the average guy on the street in Benin who is not related to the Oba. Because a lot, from Oromiyo to now, there have been many generations. So there will be a lot of descendants of the people who accompanied Oromiyo in Edo. So if you do a DNA analysis, you'll find a lot of those things in them. However, when you're talking about people at the outskirts who are not related to the palace, no, those ones, I remain to be convinced by anyone, by any academician, that they are Yorubas. They're not. They don't even feel themselves. They don't even see themselves as Yoruba.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Modupe Gan, thank you so much. Alagba Wole Oni, I've seen your hand up. Like, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Olutu. Thank you very much. I have just two quick questions for our Baba Moye. Baba Deboisa, so what name were the Yorubas calling themselves before this Yoruba word was coined?
Oh, they were okay. They weren't calling themselves a unifying name. They were Ekiti, Ijebu, Ijesha, Oyo, Egun, Awori. They were not a nation. However, they recognized themselves as descendants of the same Oduduwa.
Okay.
There was no need for them to call themselves one name. It benefited them to know that all those names were all related and they spoke mutually intelligible language. That's all you needed.
But they could understand each other, so they had a common
They could understand
language.
each other. There's no doubt that they could understand each other. And I mean, I'm not going to speak confidently about this, but there are people that if you listen hard, you will understand the language of Ebe. Ebe is in what do you call the place? Togoland. Half of them, a portion of them in Ghana, a portion of them in Togo. In the British Togoland is what eventually became part of Ghana. It was given independence with the Gold Coast. The French Togoland is what's left now that they call Togo. They all speak Ewe. And if you listen very hard, you will be able to make sense out of what an Ewe person is saying to you, no matter which part of Ewe land it came from. But that's not all. Even before you get to Ewe land, in an area like Grand Popo, in an area like Savikondi, as you are approaching Togoland from Dahomey, you discover that people are speaking languages that you couldn't call Yoruba. I don't even know what Yoruba is now, but you couldn't call it Yoruba, but you understand some of what they are saying. So there is no natural defining line. Even when you say, well, there must be a place where one stops and the other continues, that's not really the way things work with languages, because trade, movement, farming, all of those things bring people together. So I don't know where the fusions happen, but I know factually that during the days of the Oyo Empire, the Niger, that is the head of Accra, was paying Isakole to the Alafin.
Okay.
And if you go through from Oyo to go to the Gold Coast, you might pass through a town called Atakpame. Atakpame is a Yoruba-speaking community. in the heart of Togoland. So everybody, where this, and Atakpalme, from a vantage point of travel, is not that far emotionally from Sabe. From Sabe, you can call Atakpalme. Atakpalme is a Yoruba-speaking community. It is. They call themselves Ife.
So, Baba, so how about the Yorubas who are in today's Benin, Dahomey, that's now Benin today? So what they said, that when the Europeans carved up Africa, that was when they separated them from Yoruba, who are now in Ogun State.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. But that happened everywhere. Remember now that I just said that the Ebe were divided into two. The part that was dominated by the French and the part that was dominated by the British. But before that, Togoland was one entity that the German had conquered. Now, having British Togoland and French Togoland was something that happened after the First World War, when they were when the European power, principally France and England, when they were dividing up the spoils of winning the First World War, they were taking German property and dividing it among themselves. The German property that they gave to Germany at the Berlin Conference. Now that Germany is not going to be allowed to hold any property anymore, they divided it among themselves. I gave the example of Togo, Cameroon, Southwest Africa, and Mozambique. So what Europe did with us is not defining who we are. When you go to Togoland, and when you go to Dahomey today, I was there, in fact, as recently as 2020. When you go in there, you don't know that you are not in Nigeria. In terms of Yoruba, they speak to you. You think that you are, you think that you are in Upper Ogun. What do they call the place? Yeah, Upper Ogun area.
Yewa.
Yewa is even more Yoruba than, I mean, they are all the same people. They intermarry, not that they intermarry, they have the same gods, they do Igogun, they do all kinds, everything that we do in Baga, they do in that, they do all over there. And so I don't know, and that's why I'm very hesitant, because languages have also changed. I'm telling you, the gentleman I was talking about today, I hope he won't get offended what I'm getting ready to say. His wife is from Owo. And the jokes that I will make with the wife is that I don't understand the Owo language. And then he says, "What do you mean, Yoruba? Igbo ni." So you would then reply, okay, of course, or we are not Igbo, but it's difficult for some of us
to understand their language.
To understand them when they are talking.
Yeah.
If we listen hard enough, we will get it.
Yeah.
Now, if you go past or to places like Oka, Ikaramu, you are getting to what they call Akoko. And if you cross a particular boundary, you get to Akoko Edo. But even when you get to places like Soborika, which is part of Akoko Edo, more than half of them speak Yoruba. They answer Yoruba names. My classmates like Ajadi, Balogun, Igbawo, they are all, they are from Akoko Edo, not Akoko Western region, Akoko in Edo State. So, and given the way that the Yoruba language itself, that the language was called Yoruba, how do you say somebody is not Yoruba? Why is Owo Yoruba and Akoko Edo is not Yoruba?
I can give an answer to that, Baba.
Hmm?
If I can give an answer to that.
Please do, please do.
Okay. First of all, concerning Owo, before I go to Akoko Edo, now our Owo has a strong relationship with Benin.
Yes.
Very, very strong.
Very, very strong. In fact, cultural
Now,
too.
so linguistically, they have assimilated a lot of Edo words and
Yes.
Edo pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's difficult for Yorubas who have not done so to understand them.
Okay.
And language is very fluid, very, very fluid. Within a generation or two, depending on who the neighbors are, a language can change. And that's
Yes.
exactly what happened with the wars. About the Edo, as far as the Akokos are concerned, Akoko is a combination of many, many, many ethnic groups.
I see.
You see, you can go from one village to another one less than 5 kilometers away. Kilometers, less than 2 kilometers away. And you'll find a language that's not related to the language you came from before, or from the village you came from. You go to the third village, very close, 2 kilometers, and you'll find a language that is different from village 1, village 2, and mutually non-intelligible. If you do the same, what I normally do is ask them. That's an old glottochronological, simplistic comparison of languages. Just ask them to count 1 to 10 for you, and then
Mm-hmm.
ask them what do they call water? What do they call mother? What do they call father? And you can quickly see that these languages are totally different from each other. So a lot of migration occurred in the Akoko area, and different people, Igala came there, Idoma came in,
Igbira.
Ibira are there. So there's so many, many different groups that came in, even as further east than Ibira, further east than Igala. So all of them settle in Akoko Edo area. So that's why the different.
Ajaguta.
Yeah. But one good thing, I've still not been able to find out the reason for that. In those little villages, everybody bears a Yoruba name, but they do not speak Yoruba.
That is
They don't
rare.
speak Yoruba, but they have Yoruba names. When you speak to them, you can only communicate with them in Pidgin English, except those of them who have come to Lagos to live. So they will have picked up some Yoruba, but they all have Yoruba names.
Maybe they were originally Yorubas and they developed a new language.
You can't just suddenly develop a new language without retaining vestiges of your old language. It's not unless there's a complete division of the people from the original stock.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to go off now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Ejo Baba Deboye, I have a second question, sir.
Yes, sir.
My second question, sir, is around the Royal Niger Company that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
As part of the involvement of what became Nigeria, British government, Britain bought, or rather paid £865,000 to the Royal Niger Company in 1900 to take over their territories in Nigeria, in what became Nigeria. This was before the amalgamation. And my question, sir, is that, how can they, how come Royal Niger Company owned part of what was Nigeria?
What was not yet Nigeria?
Yeah. How can Britain pay them for what they didn't own? They didn't own those territories? They didn't buy them from anybody.
No. That's where you get back to the Yoruba saying, Ele which when I translated, I said the man with the gun is the majority. The point of the matter is that the Royal Niger Company, which was later on succeeded by United African Company, which was before that was this or that, they had been colonizing us since the 1400s. And when you say colonize, if you grew up in my generation, I will tell you what we witnessed. In 1950, 51 or 52, I won't remember. There was something called Empire Day. In fact, this was 1951. Empire Day was May 24 of every year. That is the day that British Empire celebrates. It was the Queen's birthday. The Queen was Queen Victoria. And Empire Day had been celebrated in all of the empire since God knows when. But when I went to school in 1951, Empire Day was the holiday of the empire. Now, what am I trying to say about it? At St. Paul's Mayfield in Gbagan, that's where all the school children from all the schools in the entire district council will come, and we do athletic events, run, jump, whatever. But before we start doing that, a district officer from Iwo, or is it divisional officer, I wouldn't know now, will come to preside over the events of the Empire Day. Are you with me, sir?
Yes.
Now, he is sitting there. I mean, the Oba of Gbagan would already be in attendance. Must be before the DO comes in. Then the DO comes in, and everybody must stand up. And they will pay the so-called national anthem. God, well, we say to Yoruba, Kọlọ́run dọba sí, kọ́ba kó pẹ́ títí.
Wow. I didn't know that they had a Yoruba version. I've
Wow.
never heard that before.
Oh, yeah, hymn number 600. Hymn number
can't
600 in the Yoruba hymn book.
Wow.
So, yọ fún ní ìṣẹ́gun ìrọ̀rá Tógò kó jọba pẹ́ títí dá ọba sí. Kì í ṣọba wa ni wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ rẹ̀ o. Ọba wọn Queen Victoria. Because tó bá lọ wo Songs of Praise, àbí Hymnal Companion, from which that was translated, God bless, God save our gracious King.
God save our Queen.
Yeah.
Ṣé ń gbọ́ mi?
Yes.
So, ọba tí àwa pọ́n létà ṣe kínní kan ní ọmọ tẹríba pẹ̀lú adé orí ẹ̀ fún D.O. tí wọ́n fi ránṣẹ́ láti Èkó. Ó lè jẹ́ ọmọ San 6 ní D.O. yẹn o, bọ̀tò òyìnbó ni. Ká la lágbára. Nígbà wọn bá ń bú àwọn ọba wa pé wọn ò ṣe gbá wọn ò ṣàwo. Wọ́n lámùkún ẹrù ẹ ṣe wọ́. Olókèlè ń wọ ẹ̀wò sàlẹ̀. We refuse. I don't know why. We refuse to look back at how things began and what make them begin.
Yep.
And I'm begging lórí pé why are they not doing it? Why are they doing it? Irú agbára wo agbára tó ti sọnù láti 1500.
Absolutely.
Àbí mo parọ́ ni?
Ó tó gbà.
No, so ẹ jẹ́ ká ti bi pẹlẹbẹ mọ́ọ̀lẹ̀ jẹ́ kó lè bá a dùn, because the real issue is that when you don't know the real source of the problem, you are addressing the wrong problem and you are not going to get the right solution.
Yeah.
Ẹ ṣeun bàbá.
Jẹ́ kí n panu mọ́.
Thank you, sir.
So you
Thank you very much.
Ẹ jọ̀ọ́ tẹ́ ẹ bá mind, let me take up from where you stopped, Baba.
Oh, no, that's about to come.
In full agreement with what you said. When we look around, Ashanti wrote about Benin, the Empire of Benin and the country of Benin in Dahomey. What most of us don't quite understand is we have to look at everything with a within a historical perspective. Tá bá ń wo gbogbo àwọn nǹkan tó ti ṣẹlẹ̀, a gbọ́dọ̀ mọ̀ what time in history did this happen? What time in history did that happen? Talking about the Benin Empire was a great, great empire. It's dead now. It's no more. Ṣùgbọ́n ìgbà tí àwọn Dahomey fẹ́ change orúkọ wọn recently, but was it 1978 or so? So wọ́n pick up the name Benin. Then wọ́n lè pè Benin, wọ́n mọ Benin pè, wọ́n á pè French, wọ́n ní Benin. But Benin náà fẹ́ sọ tán pè Benin. So we have to understand that there's a very, very big difference between the time Benin became Dahomey became Benin. Àti ìgbà tí the great mighty Benin Empire was reigning. And unless we look at that with that special look, I'm not confused. Even another issue, the Oyo issue. Oyo was a mighty, mighty empire in those days. In the 1500s, 1600s, mighty empire. Just overwhelmed, Oyo later overwhelmed during the height of his empire. Everything done in Dahomey, current Benin. Àwọn Sabe, the Sabes came under Benin Empire, under Oyo control. But Yoruba gangan ni wọ́n, because àwọn ọmọ Odùduwà ni wọ́n. You know, those are one of the 7 children of Oduduwa, and they speak Yoruba. And you go from Ibeyin, Podnovo, Ajashi, Yoruba. You go down to Osabe, Yoruba. You go to Grand Popo, ibi tí Popo of Popo wa. You're not going Grand Popo. They're all Yoruba, like we any one of us.
And they speak the same language in Grand Popo as they speak in Sabi Kondi.
Exactly.
Which is further toward Togoland.
Okay. So, tá a bá wo historical perspective, I'm confused. Are the Yorubas in Benin different from Yorubas in Nigeria? No. You cannot ní àwọn tó wà ní Benin àti wá ní 1885 ìgbà tó ń put that ruler ní àwọn Britishers àti àwọn Faransé náà kàn put a ruler down. But while we're migrating left and right within Africa over thousands of years, we didn't look at any line drawn between Republic and Nigeria. Hundreds of years from now, wọ́n bọ̀ àfi rulers ibẹ̀. Nobody thought about that. So we have to think within that historical perspective. Until your body understand our history, one is bound to make mistakes. Exactly. And be puzzled by easily explainable things.
Yeah.
But again, because we are all very intelligent people, we always ask when we don't know. And the answer is just look at those history, they'll tell you everything.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ṣé Benin or Benin?
Well, náà ni mo fẹ́ ṣàlàyé. Ìgbà tí Ọ̀rànmíyàn dé ìlú Ìgódòmìgodò. Ìgbà tó débẹ̀, torí bí nǹkan ṣe rí jákujàku tí wọ́n bínú síra wọn tó ń ṣe, òun ló ṣe pẹ̀lú yẹn ní ìlú ìbínú. Ìlú ìbínú, ṣé ń gbọ́ mi? Ìlú yẹn ló translate city. Ìbínú ni wọ́n abbreviate sí Benin. Nígbà òyìnbó ló pè ìbínú ló pè ní Benin. So
And
orúkọ òyìnbó ó ní Benin. Orúkọ tí wọ́n fúnlù yẹn gan tí wọ́n tó lè fún ọ lórúkọ ìbínú, ìlú ìbínú, a city of angry people. Bó ṣe pè nìyẹn. So ń bọ̀ bá dé dà ọmọ tó wá di Benin. Ìdí ẹ̀ tó fi di Benin. Principally because the coast was conquered, slave coast ni. Àwọn òyìnbó tó dẹ̀ conquer rẹ̀, they started calling it the Bight of Benin. Wọ́n ṣe kúrò ní Bight of Benin. Àwọn náà ló fún eastern portion beyond that ó pè ní the Bight of Biafra. Bight is a small, anyway, you know the geographical meaning of Bight. The Bight of Benin and the Bight of Biafra. Àwọn bites méjì tó ban Nigeria from the south yẹn. But the Bight of Benin is also called the Slave Coast. All the way from Accra to Porcados, that's the Slave Coast. So orúkọ tí a máa jẹ́, ṣé orúkọ tí wọ́n fún wa la máa jẹ́ ni àbí ìta fúnra wa? Or what options do we have? So,
yeah, and follow up on that. Tí èèyàn bá wo, to confirm ni pé Ọ̀rànmíyàn kò law school, kò ní PhD, kò ní MD, kò ní JD, kò ní PWD. But 800 years ago, he did a very, very great analysis. Tó fi pè ibẹ̀ yẹn ní ìlú ìbínú. The current Benin Edo people are among the brightest, the smartest people in the whole of Africa. Those people are humongously intelligent. Àmọ́ kìíní kan lè máa rí among each and every one of them, tell me more. Impulsivity and tendency towards anger. Ọ̀rànmíyàn dẹ̀ ti sọ 800 years ago tó pé wọ́n nílùú ìbínú. Up till today, if you see an Edo man who will not get angry before you drop anything on him, you show him to me.
Wow.
But it doesn't decrease his intellect. Exceedingly intelligent. Yeah. So I just thought I must add that.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Only a doctor Olopolo can possibly know that.
Yes, I can say that with all confidence.
I wouldn't know how to do that analysis. I'm so happy you are here, because now I can remember some of the ones that I know, and they seem to be fitting the description.
Yes. You just think back. And it seems like the more angry and the more impulsive they are, the more intelligent they are.
That's right. But just one more thing about languages that I want us to take into account, because I don't know how the fusion takes place. Igbos have words in common with us.
They are. And I will tell you after you
what
finish.
What you call akpa, they call aka.
Akwa. No, akwa.
Well, it depends on which part of Igbo you are. Akwa, akpa, aka. Ose for the foot. And so on and so forth.
Onu.
Onu for mouth. Onu for the mouth. Enu like yes. Onu la won pe.
Imi for imu.
And then
Tí bàbá bá stop, I'll tell you why. That's a very interesting reason.
Omi là ń pè water.
Mirin
là wọ́n ń pè.
That's right.
Odò wa tí bóyá mirin yẹn bo ni wọ́n ti rí he. Odò kan wà ní ẹ̀bá Ilé-Ifẹ̀ tí wọ́n ń pè ní Ẹ̀sìmìrìn. What is the basis for the relationship of vocabulary words like that between what we call Yoruba and what they call Igbo, separated by Edo and what have you? How did it happen? Ẹnì kan wá sọ fún mi pé mo dẹ̀ lọ ọjà ẹ̀ ṣe bí tí wọ́n ṣe tí wọ́n ṣe jọ wá Yorùbá sọ pé wọ́n jọ wá àwọn lè sọ pé a jọ wọ́n pé òrìṣà tí wọ́n máa ń bọ ní Ilé-Ifẹ̀ àti Benin òun náà ni wọ́n fi lọ sọ ìlú wọn lórúkọ tí wọ́n ń pè lónìjà ta ló fẹ́ jiyàn ni. And there are towns mo ti gbàgbé orúkọ àwọn kan there are towns between I mean I passed through that place at least twice there are towns between Agbọ̀ Bójíbójí Agbọ̀ ọ̀nà Sàbà tó jẹ́ pé Yorùbá ni wọ́n ń sọ bẹ́ẹ̀.
Yep, absolutely.
Totally Yorùbá.
And Ebu, a town named Ebu, very close to that area, and they speak fluent Yoruba, but with a different dialect of Yoruba.
Yes.
Wow.
But phenomena méjì yẹn wọ́n yàtọ̀ díẹ̀ síra wọn. Nǹkan tí Igbo fi sọ apá àpáti ọ̀nù mìíràn, which we can understand, ni pé Igbo and the Proto-Igbo language. Proto means èdè tó turn into Igbo language, and Proto-Yoruba language were one and the same. According to the Japanese, 4,800 years ago. According to the French, 5,200 years ago. So there's a branch of linguistics, called the glottochronology, where you can plug certain 200 words and feed them to the computer, and the computer will come with will give you an estimate of how long ago those two languages were separated from each other. So, Igbo ni o. We are cousins. We are cousins of 5,000 years. I just have to say something to make everybody laugh. Let me just say this, Baba. Do you remember the second Kini? Yeah. Taishe 1997. Nigeria. I should call Washington DC. I should call Washington DC. I should call London. Do you remember? Baba Adeboye. Second anniversary of Free Nigeria. Tina Dekoshe.
Yeah, 19. Yeah, Monachi. Yeah.
Thank you. At the one in Washington DC, I gave this same speech. I don't know if you were in the hall then. I relate more Igbo. nǹkan tí ààrẹ lè ní wà ń bẹ àrùn ní pé ẹ wo Oyèfúnlẹ̀ olóhùn Igbo yà kúrò níbà yàrá.
Actually, Dr. Oyèfúnlẹ̀, Oni said something about that recently.
Oni wrong. The Oni, with all due respect, did not know what he was talking about. Nope. What Oni said was sacrilegious, never based on science. And I don't know why a man as revered as Oni should have made such a statement. They're not from Ile-Ife. We are related, but they're not from Ile-Ife. Àwọn dẹ̀ kọ́ ní Igbo or Ugbo tó kúrò pẹ̀lú Ọbàtálá. Àwọn yẹn wà ní Ugbo land. Ní àwọn pínlẹ̀ pé wọn àwọn very close to Òkìtìpupa. Àwọn yẹn lọ kúrò Ìlàjẹ àti Ìkálẹ̀. Those are our cousins, direct cousins from Ile-Ife. But nǹkan tó ní sọ bọ̀bọ̀ tó jẹ́ handler Oni, I wrote him a letter and he shouldn't have allowed Oni to make such a statement.
Yeah.
He just messed up all the history, like a person who did not understand the chronology of our existence. No, I really, in that way, I relate to Igbo Beye. But we are caught.
Àwọn Igbo that ti seize on that kind of thing. Wọ́n ní gbogbo àwọn ìlú wa. Wọ́n ní àwọn làwọn ní Ìjẹ̀bú Igbo.
Of course. You trust them, they jump on that immediately. Oh yeah, Kyo issue a disclaimer for such a statement. If not, so it will cause a lot of problem later on.
Mm-hmm.
So, Baba, if I can just, if there's nobody else who wants to ask the question, I don't want to dominate the session, but I just have one point, sir, to both of you. With all this history, Baba Adibo is with everything we know about how Nigeria was created, the history of slavery, the history of independence, and what happened that we didn't actually get independence. Why is it that everybody is hanging on to this Nigeria that is not working for anybody?
No, okay. Shemole down.
Yes, sir.
Down, the answer for.
Okay.
Down, sir.
Okay. Answer now. So the fact that I say something doesn't mean that that's the only answer. But ẹ jẹ́ ká padà síbi tá a ti ń bọ̀. Nígbà táwọn èèyàn ti wọ̀ wá láàrin tí wọ́n ti ní agbára tí wọ́n ní lórí wa ní 1500 tí Queen Elizabeth I.
Will continue into the evening with a risk of a thunderstorm dropping down degrees overnight. Most cloudy tomorrow with a 30%.
Agbára tí Queen yẹn ní tó fi gbé slave ship tó pè ní tó fi gbé fún John Hawkins tí wọ́n fi ń kó wa lẹ́rú.
Something Jesus.
Jesus.
Yes. Agbára yẹn kò tí kúrò lọ́wọ́ wọn bá ṣe ń sọ̀rọ̀ yìí. Mi ò fẹ́ sọ nǹkan tó lè dájà lẹ́ o. But look at any part of the world táwọn òyìnbó ti rule tí wọ́n colonize. Tí wọ́n á sọ pé wọ́n fún wọn ní òmìnira ní in the 1950s, late 50s, early 60s. Èwo nínú wọn ló lè dìbò báwọn fẹ́ yan leader tí ò ní lọ forí balẹ̀ báwọn tó colonize wa rí bá a ṣe ń sọ̀rọ̀ yìí. Àbí mo lè mọ n bá máa sọ examples máa offend àwọn èèyàn tó pọ̀. A lè jẹ akéwì ẹ̀kọ́ ní gbọ̀ngàn tá a bá kọ́kọ́ lọ forí balẹ̀ fún wọn ní Westminster Abbey. Bá a ṣe ń sọ̀rọ̀ yìí. So kì í ṣàwa la dì mọ́ Nàìjíríà. Àwọn tó create Nàìjíríà ni ò jẹ́ kárí gbégbà. In one of the essays that I wrote not long ago, it's getting to be long ago, I said that Africa is a victim of foreign predators in collaboration with local parasites. The ordinary African has no real power, not even power to exercise his will, many times not even power to talk about what's on his mind. Ẹ má jẹ́ àtàrà wa. Níjọ́ tá a bá tàrà wa mọ́, tá a bá mọ ibi tí nǹkan tí bàtà ti ń ta wá lẹ́sẹ̀, might be the beginning of our salvation. But assuming pé nǹkan wà tá a lè ṣe tá a ṣe, that would be true. Bí a ṣe, but tá a lè ṣe, where did the enabling power come from that we can do this? We haven't created the enabling power. Yoruba Gbode that is aiming at giving us public education is only about 5 or 6 years old. How many people are attending? Among the people who bring us fantastic information to Yoruba Gbode is Baba Aliu. How often do people come? How many of them come to listen to him? That kind of thing. Nígbà tá a báwo la ṣe máa lo ọgbọ́n tá a ti kọ́ àbí ìmọ̀ tá a ti mọ̀ àbí our own individual I mean, you know, kọ́nà ọmọ ìgbàgbé ẹnu. Mo ti panu mọ́ o.
Ẹ ṣé bàbá, thank you.
Okay, I would like to add on to that.
Alàgbà òní.
Ẹ jọ̀ọ́ má bínú. Yèyé.
Yes, sir.
Ẹ jọ̀ọ́ mo sáré fẹ́ answer alàgbà òní ni o.
Okay.
Nǹkan tí mo fẹ́ béèrè lọ́wọ́ yín alàgbà ni pé question tẹ́ béèrè.
Yes.
For who is Nigerian working? Àbí bẹ́ẹ̀ kọ́?
Yeah.
So why don't you go into peace? Why don't we separate?
Yes. Why can't we? I mean, why can't we come together and realize, actually admit that it's not working, and then find a solution, which is that everybody should go their own separate ways and be their own nations as they stood before the colonialists came.
Oye mi, bẹ̀tí yẹn ò ní pé àwọn colonialists yẹn. Ṣé bá rántí nǹkan tó ń ṣe 1914 tó ń kó 2 protectorates pọ̀ so as to rule it as one to save money. Tẹ́ bá àwọn protectorate méjì to become Nigeria lẹ́yìn kẹ́ wá kó wọn sí all the different nationalities. Ìyẹn máa fún wọn ní 10, even 15 different nationalities to máa deal with. And that's not good for them. So for whom is Nigeria working? It's working for the colonialist. Is it working for you and me? No.
No.
But why don't we just sit down and say, okay, kò ṣiṣẹ́ fún wa.
Yeah.
Let's go our separate way, like you said. But somebody will come visiting you in the dead of the night. These people are criminals. So tọ́lọ́mbà lè bá gbà ká ṣe the legitimate way. Tọ́lọ́mbà lè máa bá wa ṣe àṣeṣe. But other than that, for you and I to just sit down, gbogbo ilé tá à ń pariwo and demonstrate and ṣe gbogbo yẹn, we're wasting our time. Because this evil at force wà ń bẹ̀. Wọ́n ní jẹ́ kó gba oúnjẹ lẹ́nu wọn. And Nigeria as a unit, the new oúnjẹ tó ń jẹ all the time. The French are feeding fat off us. The Britishers are feeding fat. And we must not forget that. Those are the people who control us.
Ẹ wo nǹkan tí olórí Burkina Faso nǹkan tó endure nísìnyí.
Exactly. 25 attempts. 25 assassination attempts.
Wow.
For a boy who's just the same age as our grandchildren.
Yeah. And all he's doing is finding something that works for his people.
Of course. Gbogbo nǹkan tí mo wá gbọ́dọ̀ sit back ká gbàdúrà fún nìyẹn. Christians pray for him, Muslims pray for him, oníṣẹ̀ṣe pray for him.
Yeah.
That's a golden boy who came out of Africa.
Absolutely.
So,
sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, àti gbọ́ ọmọ lọ́wọ́ èkùrọ́ kì í ṣojú bọ̀rọ̀ o. Olótù, back to you.
Ọmọ ní ká lọ mọ̀ bá dán owó tó ń kọ́.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni o. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni o. Ẹ ṣeun. So, Bàbá Aliu, ṣé ẹ ti rí nǹkan? Ojúlówó ọmọ ọkọ, bá a bá porí àparò, bá a bá porí ìrókò olúwéré ajáko, ojúlówó ọmọ ọkọ ni Bàbá Aliu. Mo sáyẹ̀nsì, mo fòǹtẹ̀tẹ̀. Bàbá Aliu, ẹ káàbọ̀. Ó yá, ẹ sọ̀rọ̀.
Hello, salaam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Àmì tó ṣàlékún o.
Salaam alaikum.
Ẹ sọ̀rọ̀, Bàbá Aliu.
Okay, ẹ fọ́nà mi báyìí.
Dáadáa.
Okay tọ̀, mo kí yín o, àdúrà owó gbà o, Ọlọ́run jẹ́ kéré oko délé o. Tọ́, èmi kàn fẹ́ sọ̀rọ̀ díẹ̀ sí kún àwọn tẹ̀ ti sọ síwájú ni. Ẹ sọ̀rọ̀ nípa, mo ń gbọ́ nípa Ẹdó, àwọn Benin. Àwọn Benin ti ń try láti turn history upside down. Wọ́n ń try láti prove pé ẹni táwa ń pariwo pé Odùduwà ipe nínú àwọn àkọsílẹ̀ tí wọ́n táwọn kọ wọ́n ń kọ níkọ pé àwọn làwọn ní Odùduwà ó wá sọ́dọ̀ wa láti wá jẹ ọba ni nínú history táwọn kọ kalẹ̀ débi pé ní ọba àwọn gan náà ń fọwọ́ sọ̀yà ipe bó ṣe rí nìyẹn ẹni tó bá kàn ẹni tí ò bá fẹ́ gbóòótọ́ ni ò fẹ́ gbóòótọ́ ó ti sọ nígbà tó fi wá síkù even ó sọ níwájú gọ́fúnà Lagos State gan ó sọ pé Èkó gan tẹ̀ ń wò ẹ́ gan àwọn gan làwọn ní history torí pé àwọn èèyàn ń try láti tọ̀nù history upside down láti lè favour wọn. Bákan náà Ọlọ́run wá mú wọn lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí àwọn kan wá ń bẹ tí wọ́n dìde tí wọ́n jẹ́ ọmọ Bìíní ipe ní ẹ fẹ́ o ẹ kọ̀ o ẹ lè change history àwọn gangan ní original ọmọ Benin ọba tó wà ń bẹ̀ yẹn kìí ṣe family àwọn kìí ṣe ìran àwọn rárá tọ́ lóòótọ́ Odùduwà Ilé Ifẹ̀ ló ti wá kìí ṣe ìran àwọn ó wá láti Ilé Ifẹ̀ ni tó sì wá jàgà tó yọ jẹ gàba lọ àwọn lórí ipe ní so èyí títọ̀ ń fẹ́ máa change history yẹn pé because kìí sára àwọn rárá àwọn gangan lọ́mọ Benin ipe so kó máa change history àwọn ti dìde wọ́n counter rẹ̀ nísìn wàhálà tó ń fà ní Benin nìyẹn pé ní rárá history tẹ̀ ń sọ yẹn irọ́ ni ẹ lè change ẹ̀ rárá. Bákan náà nípa pé mo rí tí wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ẹ̀dá kan mọ́ bínú o wọ́n sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ti Nàìjíríà pé nígbà tí gbogbo ẹ̀ rí bó ṣe rí kí ló wá dé tí ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn èèyàn ò fẹ́ pé kálukú lọ lọ́tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ n tó fà á tún òfin fẹ́ kó rí bẹ́ẹ̀ ni pé àwọn tí wọ́n ń jẹ mùlá rẹ̀ tó jẹ́ Yorùbá wọn ò fẹ́ pé àwọn ó fẹ́fọ̀ wọn ń gbádùn ìjọba àwọn ò fẹ́. Bákan náà ni Ìgbò ẹni tó jẹ́ Ìgbò náà tóun náà wà nínú gọ́fmẹ̀ntì Ìgbò tó wà nínú gọ́fmẹ̀ntì tóun náà ń jẹ mùlá tó ń gbádùn òun náà ò fẹ́ rárá àtọ̀. Bẹ́ẹ̀ náà ni àwọn adaran tó jẹ́ pé ní àwọn gan ni kinní yẹn favour jù àwọn náà ò fẹ́ ṣùgbọ́n pẹ̀lú ògo Ọlọ́run ìjọ táyé bá yọ tẹ́ bá fún mi láàyè mo fẹ́ wá gbé n tó ń trend lọ́wọ́ jáde ní Òkè Ọya nípa arábìnrin kan tó ń pè ní Kaltume Ajia Kaltume yìí ọ̀rọ̀ rẹ̀ dà gẹ́gẹ́ bí ọ̀rọ̀ obìnrin kan tó ń pè ní Darmawa ọ̀kan nínú àwọn jagunjagun Haúsá ni tó gbìyànjú fún ìran ẹ̀. Bẹ́ẹ̀ náà ni arábìnrin kan bẹ tó ń pè ní Queen Amina of Zazzau ní Zaria òun náà ó pidán ó gbìyànjú lórí pé kó dáàbò bo ìran ẹ̀ àti wàá rẹ́ nìkan níṣẹ́ tó ti dìde ó wá dàbí pé obìnrin nìkan ló máa sábà champion kọ́ọ̀sì pé ká jìjàǹgbara ká yọ àwọn èèyàn wa kúrò lóko ẹrú. Sojọ́ tọ́lọ̀ bá ní káyè rẹ̀ yọ mo fẹ́ wá yànnà náà ọ̀rọ̀ ẹ̀ tí màá play rẹ̀ màá máa tú àwọn tó sọ ọ̀rọ̀ rẹ̀ sì ti ń rinlẹ̀ gidi gan bíi pé ó ti ń ta àwọn ọmọ ìyá ẹ̀ jí history tún ò gbọ́ rí láyé gbogbo ẹ̀ ni wọ́n ń hú síta nísìn tó ń jù sórí social media even Clapperton ntí Clapperton gan sọ lórí adaran tó kú tá à ń pè ní Usman Dan Fodio ó ní agbára torí ńgbà tó kú tán Clapperton ń wá sí Sokoto ó interview àwọn èèyàn kí Clapperton tó wá ẹnìkan òyìnbó ti kankan British kan kọ́kọ́ ti wá tó náà interview àwọn èèyàn lórí pé báyìí bóò ló ṣe jẹ́ ikú tó kú yẹn ó ní agbára ó dàbí kan sọ pé èèyàn ń kà ní àwọn ìṣẹ̀lẹ̀ tó ṣẹlẹ̀ nígbà yẹn bẹ̀ tí wọ́n ń dá ìtàn gbogbo ẹ̀ ìjọ tọrọ táyé bá yọ àyànnànà rẹ̀ ẹ ṣeun mo dúpẹ́ púpọ̀ ẹ ṣeun.
ẹ ṣeun gan-an ni a gbọ́dọ̀ fi àyè yẹn sílẹ̀ ká lè gbọ́ because obìnrin our enemy's enemy is our friend. Àwọn tó máa bá wa dá ojú whatever we are doing with the Fulanis people who are also against them should be able to help us also. Ibẹ̀ ni woman ní ti kọ́ mi.
kódà ó ń pèpè pé kí àwọn Yorùbá wọ́n dákun kán wá kàn wọ́n lẹ́yìn kíkún lẹ́yìn tó ń fẹ́ support tó ń fẹ́ support pé láti lè la àwọn tó jẹ́lédè tiwa náà kí wọ́n mọ ìyàtọ̀ tó wà láàárín Adaran àti Haúsá torí tí ṣẹlẹ̀ míì bá ṣẹlẹ̀ àwọn ń rò yí pé bóyá Haúsá ni àwọn yóò bá máa bá Haúsá jà bó ṣe ń ṣẹlẹ̀ ní Jọ́ọ̀sì náà nìyẹn bó ṣe ń ṣẹlẹ̀ káàkiri ó ti wá ń gbìyànjú ní gbogbo àwọn Jọ́ọ̀sì yẹn Taraba yẹn ó ń penetrate gidi gan ni tẹ́ pé ní àwọn èèyàn wọn náà ti ń tají ń táwọn ń jà fún nísìnyí pé ọmọ ìyá àwọn nìkan làwọn ò mọ dìbò fún àwọn ò ní dìbò fún Adaran ìjọ tọ́lọ̀ ń bá ní kí àyè wá ẹ máa rí i pé program máa ní agbára ẹ ṣeun.
ẹ ṣùgbọ́n bàbá olóòtú.
ẹ ṣeun púpọ̀. mo ń yanjú nǹkan kan lórí ẹ̀ wọ́n láti ẹnjìníà yẹn ló ṣe
mo ti fún yín host mà.
ẹ ṣeun so mo dúpẹ́ púpọ̀ lọ́wọ́ gbogbo àwọn tán ti sọ̀rọ̀ bàbá Aliu ṣé ẹ lè wá lọ́sẹ̀ tó ń bọ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ Nàìjíríà náà ni à ń sọ lọ wẹ́rẹ́wẹ́rẹ́ so tẹ́ ẹ bá lè wá lọ́sẹ̀ tó ń bọ̀ a lè ṣe kó kúrò àbí báwo ni.
No problem. No problem.
ẹ ṣe sà so mo dúpẹ́ púpọ̀ ọjọ́ ti lọ a fẹ́ rí i pé a lójú wákàtí 2 sí 3 lọ ní ọ̀sọ̀ọ̀sẹ̀ lórí abala yìí ṣùgbọ́n màá fún Ọ̀túnba láàyè láti sọ̀rọ̀ Ọ̀túnba ẹ káàbọ̀ o bàbá ní ẹ pẹ̀lẹ́.
babaláwo rí i ó lé major language to be adopted fún gbogbo ilẹ̀ Yorùbá.
Tuxedo yìí lé o Kẹ́mi Ọláògùn.
tilẹ̀ yìí kọ́ ẹ ṣe bàbá ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà méjì àti gbọ́ látẹnu bàbá l'Ógbómọ̀ṣọ́ àbí bóyá kí èpè plane wọn jẹpo àbí nǹkan bẹ́ẹ̀.
bàbá l'Ógbómọ̀ṣọ́.
ìyẹn bẹ́ẹ̀ now on a more serious note òwòlé ẹ rí i pé gbogbo historical empirical àti every information àti rí i ó sì ń dàbí pé ó yìn létò pé àti rí ọ̀nà láti gbára wa lọ́wọ́ àwọn Yorùbá dẹ̀ ló bọ̀ ní tí Ọlọ́run bá ti fọ̀ tẹni hàn ní àbáyé máa ń sọ. So now that we know tó dẹ̀ yẹ pé a ṣì ń experience difficulties can we still not think pé èdè táwọn pípì gbọ́ èdè tó bá legal issue legal argument lọ ni is it safe to say that ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà méjì that's number one question ni pé tá bá fẹ́ gbára wa lọ́wọ́ àwọn pípì yìí tá bá gba ọ̀nà legal and what I'm trying to say ni wípé now that we have 1 or 2 or 3 people or 4 people or 5 people to believe pé say we can challenge gbogbo ìdọ̀tí gbogbo wèrèwèrè wọ̀rọ̀ tán fi ń lọ̀ wá yìí through legal means and the legal means we have in hand as we speak is the Treaty of 1888. So far we've not had anybody to come out and say treaty over life or because life even though at the end of the day ilé ẹjọ́ ni gbogbo a máa gbẹ̀yìn tá a máa padà torí the onus is not going to be in the court of law nílùú Èkó to say pé treaty yẹn because if we succeed ikú treaty over life ó dẹ̀ recognize even though some people want to bring into it pé factions wà ń gbà yẹn pé the Yoruba nation has always been there so kí ló sáà claim nǹkan tó jẹ́ tiwa so táwa claim ẹ̀ so all I'm suggesting ni pé mo fẹ́ káwọn ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà mi tẹ̀sí sọ̀rọ̀ ẹ bá mi dá sí pé tá a bá rí ọ̀nà míì yàtọ̀ sí pé a lè rí iṣẹ́ tó wà lẹ́yìn is it not good for us to join hands to work on that legal route ẹ ṣé sir.
Well, will I answer you quickly, Otuba? Ṣé ń gbọ́ mi? Yeah. Treaty 1888 was very interesting. That's between the British Captain Bauer àti Aláàfin Adéyẹmí the first. Alówólódù Aláàfin Alówólódù. Kí lẹ pé?
Adéyẹmí Alówólódù.
Yes, Alówólódù Adéyẹmí the first. There was a treaty, there's no doubt. But two aspects of the treaty, Timori and me, which one is very legitimate. You can't describe Yoruba country as consisting of K2, Iseyin, and some 3 or 4 other little minor places,
Yes.
Very close to Oyo. But there's another treaty called Timo come out of Timo research, láàárọ̀ ìgan, tó sọ fún kó include Oyo Township, or the Oyo, the Gebu, local Jebu. So I'm presuming Omini Jebu, and there's another group to mention where we in local Yoruba country.
Egba?
No, it didn't include Egba. The treaty Timori, Matuwo, but I didn't see Egba, but also Jebu. But and I'm wondering, how could that be? The story, the concept of Yoruba land, Yoruba people did not come until after man to call Yoruba Bible, yeah.
Just Ajayi
Crowther. The concept of Yoruba people as one did not come until after he came and went. I think the fact ni pé Ọ̀yọ́ náà ń pè ní Ọ̀yọ́ ẹrú ọba, ọ̀nà ń pè ló metamorphosize sí Yorùbá, and that after touching pé Ọ̀yọ́ as Yorùbá for millennia ni Ajayi Crowther wá extend orúkọ yìí sí gbogbo àwa Yorùbá yòókù. Yes, granted, we're all cousins. We're all one and the same, actually. We're all children of Oduduwa. But we've not always seen ourselves. The setup in our part of the world could make it necessary. We know we're cousins, but we're not under the same ruler. Ijebu doesn't want to submit himself to Ijesha king or to an Ekiti king, because Jebu lòun, or Egba lòun, or Igbona lòun. So we have to understand that very well. Catholic understand the historical perspective of the Alówólódù, the king of the Yoruba. So we must understand that Kawudada. Maybe there may be a third treaty. Thomas of Mwakwe, if you in the southwest Nigeria. If that is the case, what there's a Yoruba in Gbogbo current southwest Nigeria, then we're home free. But I don't know whether such document exists or not.
Okay. Olutu, can I just say something about this question?
Go ahead, sir.
Well, Professor, I won't take much. It's a pity that Bashigu is not here today because he has done a lot of work on this issue. And in the Yoruba Party UK, we actually have a copy of the original treaty, which was handwritten, But as part of that treaty, it does say, in Koteso, you are absolutely correct, but in the same treaty, it's mentioned that all Yoruba-speaking peoples, in addition to those 4 areas they mentioned, the treaty says, include all Yoruba-speaking peoples. So, I just I add that. But, with, like I said, it's a pity that Bashir is not here today because he has done a lot of research on this 1888 treaty, and he will have been able to answer your question properly, Otumba. Thank you, sir.
Well, okay, if I can quickly jump in here again. All I'm trying to do here is just to let the audience understand the way ọ̀nà àbáyọ, because as it is, if you continue to pursue the political route, looks like òyìnbó máa fi wá ṣe, máa fi wá tayín ni. So, as it is, even even if you want to take the part of excellent argument of Dr. Oyefule, the description of that part of Yoruba that we are talking about, even at that, Katie ni wípé we go to court, which we are going to go to court any which way. Tọ́ bá tiẹ̀ pé wọ́n bá ìlú mẹ́ta péré yẹn náà recognize, Burkina Faso tí tó wọn, kò tí lè tó wọn. I don't know whether I'm making sense.
You are making sense. Ṣé wo lè dá sí?
Oh, bẹ́ẹ̀ ni sà.
Number one tí I miss, tó dàbí gbà pé I miss, ó ní pé lóòótọ́ a ní tọ́lọ́ bá ti fọ̀tá ẹni hàn ni kò lè pani mọ́. Láyé ìgbà tó jẹ́ pé ìtọ́ta fi ń pààyàn, ó ní kí wọ́n gún lọ́bẹ àbí kí wọ́n ṣaládàá àbí kí wọ́n fi nǹkan sínú oúnjẹ rẹ̀. Ayé ti yí padà kúrò níbẹ̀ yẹn. Ẹnìkan lè wà ní Washington nísìnyí kó press button kan ní Washington tó máa pa gbogbo Nàìjíríà rẹ̀. I mean, ayé ìgbà tí o ti mọ̀ ọ̀tá rẹ tí o lè pa ọmọ, ọ̀tá also, the maximum ọ̀tá had very limited reach. Unlike now where your ọ̀tá can reach thousands and thousands of miles. Tí o tiẹ̀ ní fojú kàn rí, I think we should know that. Number two, there is still a lot of wisdom nínú èdè Yorùbá tó sọ pé ọ̀nà kan ò wọjà. Nobody who wants peace and prosperity for us says that we should not go the constitutional route. It's just that they sometimes doubt that constitutional route will work because nǹkan tí wọ́n rí jẹ́ ń bẹ̀. Àwọn tí wọ́n ó fi àṣẹ sí constitutional route wọ́n ó jẹ́ kó ṣeé ṣe. Èyí tí wọ́n rí jẹ́ ń bẹ̀ ò lè jẹ́ kí wọ́n ó ṣe. But that's a statement of hopelessness tí you take into account pé magic lè ṣẹlẹ̀ kí wọ́n yí ọkàn wọn padà. But magic lè ṣẹlẹ̀. Number three, mo fẹ́ ká wo ìkan tí Amẹ́ríkà ṣe lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí. Àwọn èèyàn tí ó ń gbé South Africa tó ń pè ní Boas, àwọn Amẹ́ríkà lọ kó àwọn kan bẹ̀ tí àwọn the same Amẹ́ríkà tó sọ pé àwọn ò wá immigrants, ó lọ kó àwọn kan bẹ̀ onílé mo ti gbàgbé bó ṣe pé wọn. Ó kó wọn wá bí yìí torí pé wọ́n funfun. Ó kó wọn wá bí yìí láti bó ṣe ń lé àwọn Hispanics àtàwọn dúdú lọ kù bí bẹ́ẹ̀ ló kó àwọn yẹn wá bí. That mentality ò tí ì tán lára àwọn tá à ń pè lọ́tà wa. So tí èmi ò I mean I may not be sure that the constitutional approach will work, but I'm also not blocking it at all. I'm praying pé tó bá máa ṣiṣẹ́ kó ṣiṣẹ́, but a gbọ́dọ̀ lójú tèmi a gbọ́dọ̀ submit ourselves to just that one approach as if other approaches are not possible. Tó bá ṣiṣẹ́ ń bẹ̀, I will be delighted. Now, so I am with Bashegun. I'm with everybody tó ní formula bá ṣe máa yọ níbẹ̀. It might not be that I'm with them, doesn't mean that I'm investing energy the way you invest. Because I'm with everybody to fẹ́ gbà wálẹ̀, and I'm just going to spend my energy where I think it matters the most. And where do I think it matters the most? The preponderant disaster tó wà láàrin wa is ignorance. Tó o bá lọ gbé àpótí ìbò kalẹ̀ lónìí tó sọ pé kí àwọn èèyàn wọn dìbò bóyá wọ́n fẹ́ kúrò ńbẹ̀ àbí wọ́n fẹ́ kúrò ńbẹ̀, you will lose.
Yep.
Àbúkárọ́.
100%. You're right, sir.
Then why? I mean, nígbà táwọn èèyàn ti mọ̀ yẹn tí wọ́n mọ̀ pa àmọ́ nothing pé wọ́n ti sọ wá dé ẹ̀wọ́n ní tó bá sọ wọ́n dúró lórí búkú náà ní fi bú wọn. Tá a bá ní ẹ jẹ́ ká ní ká ṣe kí wọ́n ti porúkọ referendum. Ká bá àwọn èèyàn léèrè bó ni wọ́n fẹ́ lọ. Á yà yín lẹ́nu. What the outcome will be. And that outcome will be that way because they are totally ignorant. And that ignorance, I mean, kò yẹ kẹ́rù ò mọ̀ bà mí mọ́ I'm in my 80s. That ignorance is based upon nǹkan tá a ti gbé jẹ over 200 years. Religion. Kò sí nǹkan tó dàbí Lárúbáwá tó bá jẹ́ Mùsùlùmí. Kò sí nǹkan tó dàbí Gẹ̀ẹ́sì tó bá jẹ́ onígbàgbọ́. Onígbàgbé ni gbogbo wọn torí onígbàgbé ní gbàgbé bó ń ṣe dáyé bí ọ̀nà tó ń gbà wá. A sọ pé ọ̀nà tẹ́lòmíì fi hàn òun nìkan. Onígbàgbọ́ kiriyó, onígbàgbọ́ òdodo Mùsùlùmí. Wọ́n ti kó wọ́n they are not bad people, but they've inherited generations of self-denial. Tó jẹ́ pé ìwọ tí wọ́n bí láàrin wọn kí ló mọ̀ ṣebí ṣe bọ́mọ àríkẹ́ ni ọ́ tọ́wọ́ àmọ́ bá ọmọ jiyàn lórí òyìnbó àbí lórí Lárúbáwá. We cannot ignore that. The only thing we can do about it is to work hard at re-educating our people. Kójú wọn là sí nǹkan tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀. And unlike many people, and even people who are somewhat younger than I am, I have unbelievable faith pé eventually, nígbà táwọn èèyàn bá enough people bá mọ bí tá a ti ń bọ̀, they will change. We will be able to fight along the line pé ó tó jẹ́ ọmọ Léfì. But faith ni mo sọ yẹn, it's not certainty. So mi ò ní kẹ́ni tó bá ní ọ̀nà mi ò mọ̀ gbà. Gbogbo alájọ máa jẹ àǹfààní tá a bá gbòmìnira. So you don't block that. But you want to invest your energy where you think it will give you maximum bank. So ibi tí mo wà nìyẹn. Mi ò rí àti pariwo òmìnira ní ìsìn ọjọ́ ti pẹ́. But I want to say something that is not possible to document. The number of documents, the number of news items tí mo rí kalẹ̀ ẹnu jẹ́ mẹ́ta yìí tó sọ pé àwọn èèyàn wa ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí í gbọ́n. Gbogbo àwọn ọmọ tí ò fẹ́ lọ ṣe oko nílé nígbà tí wọ́n ro jẹjẹ lẹ́kọ̀ọ́ wọ́n ti ń gbọ̀nà lé lọ tí wọ́n lọ gbé pákí. Gbogbo àwọn ọmọ tí ìkànnì mo kalẹ̀ ẹnu jẹ́ mẹ́ta yìí alánàá ni. Ẹni tó gbọ́n lẹ́yìn tó gbọ́n lódì lẹ́yìn bí pékeré anyway ó ń sọ fún wa pé láyé òun o grandfather great grandfather great great grandfather Mùsùlùmí ni wọ́n ò sì gbọ́dọ̀ bẹ́rì Mùsùlùmí níbi tí wọ́n ti ń bẹ́rì kiriyó. So àwọn ará alẹ́ òun tó jẹ́ onígbàgbọ́ kiriyó àtàwọn ará lóhun tó jẹ́ onígbàgbọ́ Mùsùlùmí wọn ò lè sọ pé orísun àwọn kí ibi tí wọ́n sùn sí ò jẹ́ ibì kan náà. In other words, nǹkan táwa value àti Yorùbá pé kí fámìlì wa kí wọ́n ṣe jọ wà láyé ni wọ́n jọ wà lọ́nà ọ̀run. Irọ́ Mùsùlùmí àti kí yóò ti bá bẹ̀ jẹ́. Ó ní láyé òun ò gbàbẹ̀ yẹn lọ mọ́. In other words, there is little knowledge here, little knowledge there is opening our people's eyes to the horrendous division and loss of cultural assets and essence. Táwọn nǹkan tó kó wá bá wa tó bá wa ó dẹ̀ jinlẹ̀ lọ́kàn wa. I give you one last example and I will shut up. My mother died in 1999. Kó tó délé wa dàtí kó tó fẹ́ bàbá mi o babaláwo paraku ni bàbá ẹ̀. Àtìyẹ́ ọjọ́ kan náà ni wọ́n ṣèṣàmì fún èmi àti òun ó ti bí mi tẹ́kun ó tó sàmì fún un níjọ́ tí wọ́n torí ẹ̀ẹ̀kan lọ́dún ni àlùfáà máa ń wá sí gbẹ̀ngàn wá sàmì ní African Church ní gbẹ̀ngàn ni mo sọ yìí o so ìyá yẹn wá kú ìgbà tó kú àwọn àbúrò mi ní báwo ni ká ṣe ṣe mo ní inú ilé láàrin ilé méjì tí mo kọ́ fún for the same plot in between them ni gbogbo ẹ̀ ni mo kọ́ sin ìyá mi sí. ṣé ẹ̀ ń gbọ́ mi? àwọn mi ò sọ pé kí ìyá mi ó change religion rẹ̀ lẹ́yìn ìgbà tó kú tán o. àwọn àlùfáà African Church yìí lè wá ṣe kìíní kí wọ́n bá gbé lọ sí church kí wọ́n ṣe. African Church fà kíkọ́rí wọn láwọn ò ní Anglican Church wọ́n fà kíkọ́rí wọn láwọn ò ní bàtẹ̀ta tí ò bá jẹ́ pé wọ́n máa pèsè bẹ́ẹ̀rì ni wọ́n ń pe cemetery tó wà ní kíní pé táwọn ò bá ti lè lọ sí cemetery àwọn ò ní kankan ṣe pẹ̀lú ẹ̀. ṣé ń gbọ́ mi?
dáadáa.
ẹ bá gbé ìyá mi lọ sí bẹ́ẹ̀rì mo lẹ́gbàá àbúrò rẹ̀ sì ti ṣe mùsùlùmí. wọ́n ẹ̀ tí ẹ̀ ní wọ́n ò ní súnmọ́ra wọn torí ìjọba ti sì ìyá mi tán ẹlòmíì rẹ̀ sì sẹ́gbẹ̀ẹ́ ẹ̀. so principally kí nìyẹn fẹ́ sọ fún wa àwọn ló ń tú wa ká not only politically but even spiritually. Ọlọ́run ló wá gbà fún mi tọ́lá mi ò sí lé mi ò dẹ̀ tó lé lọ́ngbà yẹn torí lẹ́yìn tá a ti ń ṣe Yorùbá ṣe kìíní kẹta tí wọ́n ti ń wá mi ní Ìkẹjà ni. tó lè Áfíríkà bá gbà pé àwọn á conduct funeral fún ìyá mi ní African Church but àwọn kọ́ ló máa gbé débi tá a máa sin sí àwọn ò kọ̀ pé kí wọ́n sin sí ẹ̀kúlé mi o but àwọn kọ́ ló máa lọ ṣe eérú fún eérú ilẹ̀ yẹ̀pẹ̀ fún yẹ̀pẹ̀. ṣé ń gbọ́ mi?
Àgbọ̀nsà.
lẹ́yìn yẹn ọ̀kan nínú àwọn àbúrò mi ṣaláìsí mo ní kí wọ́n lọ sí ẹgbẹ́ ìyẹ́ ẹ̀. The same African Church tó gbà fún ìyá mi kò gbà fábúrò mi. lẹ́yìn yẹn ọmọ kan tún kú oníkan lọ sí ẹgbẹ́ yẹn wọ́n gbà yẹn. In other words, what I'm saying is ó ṣe jẹ́ pé ta ni wọ́n ti ń control gbèsè ayé wa báwo la ṣe lè gba òmìnira ń gbò jẹ́ pàwọ́ gan àti gba wèrè mọ́ mẹ́sìn. So my dear brother Ọ̀túnba àwọn tó mọ̀ nípa kinní yìí kọ́ ló ń dá wa dúró àwọn tí ò mọ̀ nípa rẹ̀ they are in the overwhelming majority.
bẹ́ẹ̀ni.
ìyẹn ni ibi tí wàhálà wa wà nìyẹn. tẹ́ ẹ bá mọ ọ̀nà tá a lè gbé gbà ó wàláhì tàlà ìsúnmọ́ bí láì we crawl in front of you and say kábíyèsí in order to just get us out of this mess.
ẹ ṣeun bàbá ọjọ́ ti lọ.
ẹ jọ yeye just one more a quick one just a quick addition to ohun tí bàbá sọ. Bàbá ní sọ̀rọ̀ tán sáà adé máa rí yín bá ṣe wọ́n pé gẹ́gẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe sọ́nsìn àwọn tó máa dá bísínẹ́sì tí church ní o bí ti mosque ní o bí kinní kan lẹ́ni the target market wọn ni pé ọmọ ìpè there is a large collection of mumus láàrin wa.
Yeah.
That because that's the product that's àwọn ní target audience.
àwọn ọlọ́dẹ̀ wà ń lé.
bẹ́ẹ̀ni then because inú àwọn ara wọn ilé ni wọ́n bẹ̀ sí criticize ara wọn pé àwọn ló ṣe jẹ́ pé àwa ẹ̀sìn tiwa Christianity tiwa nìkan àwa nìkan là ń rí Ọlọ́run tá à ń bá sọ̀rọ̀ pé ibo tiẹ̀ láti ń pàdé Ọlọ́run gangan náà kátiẹ̀ ló ń bá yín sọ̀rọ̀ tẹ̀ gbọ́ ó ti jẹ́ pé àwa nìkan là ń rí Ọlọ́run sọ fún mi pé kẹ má lọ sí tọ́lẹ̀tì mọ́ ní every Friday ẹ̀ láti gbààwẹ̀ oṣù méjì kínní kankan. Ọlọ́run dẹ̀ láìkí ẹni tí tó ń fi nǹkan lé ayé yìí tó ń kó mọ́ra but the same pastor àti gbogbo wọn ni wọ́n ní Rolls Royce náà ní Mercedes náà ní oríṣiríṣi nǹkan.
tí a fi máa kọ́ wọn lọ́gbọ́n nìyẹn.
So put this together ó pẹ̀lú nǹkan tó jẹ́ wípé gẹ́gẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe sọ́sà ọ̀rọ̀ òwe tèmi dẹ̀ ń pa sínú ọ̀rọ̀ approach tíátà ń tẹ̀lé bá fẹ́ fi legal end àmì afẹ́ legal route approach problem yìí ó ní pé tí ọkùnrin bá réjò tóbìnrin bá pa kéjò ṣáà ti kú ni tó wà nílẹ̀ yìí
bẹ́ẹ̀ni
bẹ́ẹ̀ kékeré bẹ̀rẹ̀ ṣe observe sir àárín méjì ẹ̀sìn ní àwọn kan lára wa tó yẹ pé bó tiẹ̀ pé wọ́n lè fìdí ìgò kọ̀hó tán wọ́n lè ya triangle rú ìtì oríṣiríṣi tẹ̀yìn mọ́ Pythagoras tó tẹ̀yìn àwọn òkun tí ẹ̀ yé wọn ni tó bá rí báyìí wọn máa bínú ni tó náà rò pé kò ṣe solve so the next non resolve sí ni pé kán máa bú àwọn tó tún fẹ́ try pé àníkéjì ó má ṣáà ti lọ so ọ̀rọ̀ náà tí bá ní kò yé wa irọ́ là ń pa ó yé wa bẹ́ẹ̀ tá a kàn ní ìkà nínú as individuals ẹ̀dá èèyàn fúnra ara wa tó yẹ pé ó dàbí kò sígbà tá à ní sọ lọ́run lẹ́nu pé ṣé bàbá mọ̀ ń pa existence wa gangan torí irọ́ tán ti ń pa mọ́ gangan ti pọ̀ jù.
yes ẹ dákun ẹ jẹ́ kí n.
bàbá ní ká máa gbà bí ẹni gbàgbé bàbá ẹ sọ you have the last word.
mi ò rò pé ìkà wà nínú wọn mi ò rò pé ìkà wà nínú wọn àtọ̀ mi ò sọ pé àárí ìtò níkànú nínú wọn o àwọn ni wọ́n sọ pé àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ Ọlọ́run bá sọ̀rọ̀ tí wọ́n parọ́ mọ́ra wọn tí wọ́n dẹ̀ fi yẹn tan ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ èèyàn jẹ but economy wa ló fà á ìgbà tí wọ́n replace economy wa táwọn òyìnbó replace economy wa with monetary economy tó jẹ́ pé wọ́n ń ṣe coin wọ́n ń ṣe currency tó jẹ́ pé gbogbo ọ̀nà tá a fi ń jẹun tẹ́lẹ̀tẹ́lẹ̀ ó ti di counterfeit tá a gbọ́dọ̀ ṣe mọ́ ibo lẹ wá fẹ́ kẹ́ni tí ò lóko tí ò lódò tí ló ń jẹ kódà ìgbà tí káwọn òyìnbó tó dé táwọn babaláwo máa dífá fún àwọn èèyàn wa pé ọ̀nà tó yẹ kó gbà lọ́rẹ̀ kiri wọn ò gba nǹkan lọ́wọ́ wọn tápá àwọn ò ká.
bẹ́ẹ̀ni.
ìfà wọ́n máa ń pòwe kan ní kí ni wọ́n ní orin káàkiri kọ́kọ́ bí òtòṣì babaláwo tó bá yẹ pé babaláwo bá ń tú wa jẹ ni kò ní tòṣì. so principally ignorance yẹn lèmi focus lé lórí pé kì í ṣe pé wọ́n fi ń ṣèkà bíi pé wọ́n wà no àwọn tó ń fi ṣèkà àwọn àfa àwọn lèmọ́mù àwọn but àwọn tí ò fi ṣèkà tó jẹ́ pé wọn ò kàn mọ bí wọn bá gbé nǹkan gbà àwọn ni majority àwọn èèyàn èmi ò fẹ́ wàásù fún pásítọ̀ mi ò fẹ́ wàásù fún lèmọ́mù torí nǹkan tí wọ́n mọ̀ tí wọ́n dẹ̀ ń lò ó wà clear sí wọn ó dẹ̀ wà clear sí mi náà but àwọn tó ìyá rẹ̀ gan-an lèmi fẹ́ ká address but síbẹ̀síbẹ̀ o you are right tẹ́ bá wá lọ sí kóòtù ọ̀hún tẹ́ ṣe pé legal something ọjọ́ tádájọ́ bá dájọ́ pé ẹnì case torí wọ́n á sọ pé ẹnìkan sáìn ìwé pé aláàfin ṣe ìrọ́gbu x tí wọ́n kọ síbẹ̀ yẹn ibi tó máa sáìnsì tó bá ń sáìn ni wọ́n máa ń gbé x sí àbí ẹ̀ tí ì rí yẹn lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí sign here sign there.
bẹ́ẹ̀ ni tẹ́ bá ti gbé x sí tó bá jẹ́ pé x nìkan ló wà ń bẹ̀ wọn ò sáìnù.
òkú ọ̀sáìn nothing tó gbà tá a bá wá lọ kóòtù la sọ pé ẹ̀sáìn rẹ̀ aláàfin ṣe gbá nítorí o ní aláàfin tí ò lọ skul tí ò mọ ha láyé ìgbà yẹn ìwé èwo ló sáìn èmi ò sọ pé wọn ò ní dọ́kúmẹ̀ntì wọn parọ́ pé nìkan sáìn ẹ̀ o mi ò sọ yẹn nǹkan tí mò ń sọ ni pé mi ò tiẹ̀ mọ̀ bóyá wọ́n lè ṣe DNA.
gèǹde ni nígbà ń sọ ní kúkúrú ni pé gèǹde ni kìí ṣe signature.
ẹbí tó bá jẹ mi ò sọ pé kẹ má pọ̀ sú ẹ̀ bọ̀ ìjọ tádájọ́ bá dájọ́ tó sọ pé yes ẹ̀yin náà lè sign dọ́kúmẹ́ǹtì yìí ibi tí a dẹ̀ ń bá lọ ìgbà àwo kìíní kẹsàn-án dẹ̀ ń pàkọ́ but a lè ṣe gbà a lè ṣàwo pàkúté ti má parò nítorí pé tó bá ti ṣe kìíní yẹn it becomes international law pé adájọ́ àti gbé lọ sí kóòtù adájọ́ ti dá o kìíní nìyí ọtún mi sọ pé kò lè dá o ẹ̀rù bà mí pé níjọ́ tó bá ti dá ẹjọ́ yẹn
ó ti di àbákú aṣọ awo.
whereas èyí tí mo rò pé a lè tẹ̀lé táwọn èèyàn bá mọ ibi tí bàtà ti ta wọ́n lẹ́sẹ̀ àwọn fúnra ara wọn in their multitude ló máa lóka wa lọ.
àmì ẹ ṣeun bàbá ẹ ṣeun
ẹ
ẹ
ṣeun
kú
yèyé
àtàárọ̀ gbogbo ẹ̀yin èèyàn wa
yèyé
ẹ
nìbàdàn
kú ẹ́n?
mo ṣẹ̀yìn ni.
èmi ò ẹ dákun ṣe rí pé mi náà mo wọlé mò ń jáde ní ẹjọ́ nítorí ọlẹ ẹ̀yin lẹwà àṣẹ mi gbogbo èèyàn bá ti ẹsẹ mi.
Gèlè yín tó ṣe yáyáyá yìí kò tiẹ̀ jẹ́
bóyá
ká rọ̀
torí pé ìsanwó ògèlè
kò jẹ́
lẹ́nu
àárọ̀
ṣe ń
kan
bàjẹ́ fún ẹsẹ̀ mi.
bẹ́ẹ̀
àwọn tó
mo
bá
béèrè
máa
bàbá
sanwó.
mo béèrè bàbá lóṣogbo a béèrè pé ẹ tí sọ̀rọ̀ èmi sọ̀rọ̀ ọmọ ní àìtí ìgbà tí
bàbá
lóòótọ́ síbẹ̀
lóṣogbo kọ́ ni wọ́n o ẹ̀yin náà tó
Ògbómọ̀ṣọ́.
ẹ ti
èké
ti
ni
fẹ́
wọ́n ń ṣe èké ni wọ́n ń ṣe.
bàbá lÓgbómọ̀ṣọ́ ẹ dákun ẹ má bínú àwọn náà ni ọ̀dàdá ti fẹ́ já dálá ìgbà tí mi ò sí nílé àwọn ni host tó sì wù wọ́n ni wọ́n ń fi host ṣe mo rò pé ẹ̀yin náà máa sọ̀rọ̀ Mexico tí wọ́n ń lọ gbogbo ìgbà.
yèyé o ti fẹ́ bá wọn dá sí àmọ́dá.
èmi mo láti jí kínní kúrò lórí mi mo láti wórí ẹni tí wọ́n yí lé.
ṣẹ́rí tó bá jẹ́ pé wọ́n ṣe máàkì sí ẹgbẹ́ nìbá ní mo wá ọ èmi wá bàbá
ó dáa o.
ẹ ṣàjẹ́ wọn sọ̀rọ̀ ẹ tún ti ń gbalẹ̀ ẹ dákun ẹ má bínú bàbá lÓgbómọ̀ṣọ́ ikú gbàgbé mi.
ẹ má bínú sà ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò.
mi ò bínú mo wà attentive sí gbogbo lectures tí a ń gbọ́ látọ̀dọ̀
èmi rò pé
bàbá.
tiẹ̀ wà occupied ni torí ẹ̀yin gan mọ̀ọ́mọ̀ náwó.
ṣe mọ̀ tá a bá ti rí ẹni tó ní ìmọ̀ ìjìnlẹ̀ ju ẹni lọ ó yẹ ká máa kẹ́kọ̀ọ́ ńbẹ̀ ìyẹn ni mo ṣe dákẹ́ mo torí tá a bá ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa history ìwọ̀nba ni mo mọ̀ so mo dẹ̀ dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ bàbá Adébóyè àti bàbá ọlọ́pọlọ tí ò lè wo Trump ẹni tó sick wà lọ́dọ̀ yín bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn tó rìn rẹ́gbẹ̀ kiri ẹ̀ lè wo kí wàá ní anyway mo dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ bàbá Bíyòyè Fúlẹ̀ àti bàbá Adébóyè fún history tẹ́ fi kọ́ wa lé.
ẹ ṣé o ẹni mo ni ló ń ṣe ni o ẹ ṣé o.
inú mi dùn gidigidi ìkan náà tí mo kàn fẹ́ sọ nípa èyí tí bàbá sọ̀rọ̀ nípa how the slavery came to an end pé it was because of industrial revolution. Yes, it was. Industrial revolution contributed to it. But if we remember very well, there was always rebellion in the slave camps, especially Haiti and the Caribbeans.
Yes.
Remember? Yes. So that also, that incapacitated the slave traders, the merchants, to the extent that they were not, it became unprofitable for them. And then the emancipation of industrial revolution also quickened it. So I just wanted to point that out. And tabadẹ ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa àwọn èèyàn wa tó wà nílé tí ò tí ì mọ̀ kan. Ṣé rí ẹ má yẹ ká parọ́ fúnra wa. Awareness dáa, ó yẹ ká ṣe é. But àwọn olóṣèlú, every awareness tá a bá ṣe wọ́n ń scuttle. Àwọn dẹ̀ wà ń bẹ̀ wọ́n lówó lọ́wọ́ tán lè fi ṣe é. So problem tá a ní nìyẹn, àwọn olóṣèlú wa ní problem tá a ní. Tá a bá wo ìtàn àwọn tó ti ń jàjàgbara, èmi ò rí púpọ̀ nu wọn tó yẹ pé through court náà lọ tán fi ṣe. Èmi ò sọ pé ká má lọ sí court tó tá a bá fẹ́ lọ, but púpọ̀ nu wọn ò lọ sí court. Either kó jẹ́ pé naturally there was an implosion from within, or kó jẹ́ wípé wọ́n jà, wọ́n túká, oríṣiríṣi báyìí ló kíní ẹ̀ ṣe ń ṣe. So láàárín wa nílẹ̀ Yorùbá, ohun tó dẹ̀ ń bà mí lẹ́rù sí ni pé lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí, things have been peaceful in Yoruba land for some time. But lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí tẹ́ bá kíyèsí ìjà láàárín àwọn ọba, àwọn kan ti ń dálẹ̀, wọ́n ti ń húlẹ̀. Even nígbà táwọn ọba gan ò sọ̀rọ̀, àwọn kan tó jẹ́ àwọn social media activists, wọ́n ti ń hújà sílẹ̀ láàárín Aláàfin, láàárín Ọ̀ọ̀ni, Aláàfin ló tóbi jù, Ọ̀ọ̀ni ló tóbi jù, Ọ̀ọ̀ni lé ọba mélòó, Aláàfin ló bá mélòó. Where are we going with this? Báwo la ṣe fẹ́ dẹ́kun irú nǹkan báwọn yẹn? and tá bá dẹ̀ wò àwọn nǹkan wọ̀nyí ló fa history wa. Our history has been twisted. History ilẹ̀ Yorùbá kì í ṣe bó ṣe wà 200 years ago ló wà lénìí. Oríṣiríṣi àtàmọ́ àti ohun tó yẹ àti ohun tí ò yẹ ló ti wọnú history wa, torí pé history wa ti wà polluted and adulterated. So a ní problem láwa Yorùbá, and mi ìmọ̀gbọ́n tá a fẹ́ dá. À ń péjọ níbí lọ́sọ̀ọ̀sẹ̀, à ń sọ̀rọ̀ lórí ẹ̀. Yeah, we are trying to find solution, but it's not far reaching. Èmi ò dẹ̀ mọ̀ bá a ṣe fẹ́ ṣe. Àwọn tí bàtà ń ta lẹ́sẹ̀ gan-an, àwọn ò mọ̀ pé bàtà ń ta àwọn lẹ́sẹ̀.
Torí wọ́n gbàdúrà.
Sá.
Wọ́n ní wọ́n ń gba àdúrà.
You see, ibi tí problem wà nìyẹn.
Àdúrà lẹ́bọ.
You see, ibi tí problem wà ni pé àwọn ọ̀tá wa ní àwa tá ń sọ pé a fẹ́ kí Nàìjíríà pín. I mean, àwọn ọ̀tá wa ní àwọn olóṣèlú, àwọn lèmọ́mù àtàwọn àlùfáà ìjọ onígbàgbọ́. Àwọn mẹ́ta yẹn lọ̀tá wa. Torí I mean, àwọn ṣé kò yẹ kí ẹ wúrú àwọn tá ń pè ní GO àtàwọn lèmọ́mù kankan, ṣé kò yẹ ká máa sọ fáwọn èèyàn wọn nítójú òótọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ pé báyìí ló ṣe yẹ kí ìlú yìí rí, bí ìlú yìí ṣe wà tẹ́lẹ̀ nìyí. A ní gbogbo benefit wọ̀nyí tẹ́lẹ̀, kò sí mọ́. Kí ló dé tá ò lè ní? Ẹ lọ bá àwọn olóṣèlú yín kẹ́ béèrè lọ́wọ́ kí ló ṣẹlẹ̀. Ṣé kò yẹ káwọn olóṣèlú, àwọn àlùfáà wa, àwọn lèmọ́mù wa kán máa ràn wá lọ́wọ́ láti máa propagate gbogbo nǹkan wọ̀nyí? But they won't do it. Torí àwọn náà ń rí gbà lọ́wọ́ olóṣèlú.
Ẹ̀rù olóṣèlú ń bà wọ́n.
Well, kì í tẹ̀ ṣe pé ẹ̀rù ń bà wọ́n nìkan. Wọ́n ń rọ́wọ́, wọ́n ń rí nǹkan gbà lọ́wọ́. Ẹ wá dúró church náà ń kọ́ káàkiri. You know, bọ́n ṣe ń gbowó òjò náà ń gbà lọ́wọ́ olóṣèlú.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni.
So ibi tí problem wa wà nìyẹn. So we have this fight to fight with we have three fronts in front of us. Báwo la ṣe fẹ́ jà tàbí fẹ́ win? Olóṣèlú wà ńbẹ̀, lèmọ́mù wà ńbẹ̀, àlùfáà GO wà ńbẹ̀. So a ní iṣẹ́ ńlá láti ṣe láwa tá a jẹ́ ọmọ Yorùbá. Tá a bá ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa emancipation, tá a bá ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa pé a fẹ́ Yorùbá nation. Then the present crops of media activists tó ń dájà sílẹ̀ láàrin cultural instability tó ń dá sílẹ̀. Kọ́lọ̀ máa kí yẹn tún fa wàhálà lẹ̀ Yorùbá ni. Ẹ ṣé olóòtú.
Ọlọ́ba mi ṣe mo mọ Ọọ̀ni, mo sì mọ Aláàfin Adéyẹmí tó ṣaláìsí, so I will find my way to wá ṣẹ́kù ẹ̀mẹ́jà lórí.
Ẹ̀mí ìpẹ́ ẹ̀ ní lọ sí gbọ̀ngàn. Ṣé tó bá di gbáwó ẹ̀ ní lọ sí gbọ̀ngàn?
Rálọ̀, àní mo mọ àwọn ọba yẹn, so máa lọ dọ̀bálẹ̀ fún wọn ni pé kí wọ́n mọ̀ jà.
Okay.
Ohun tó tiẹ̀ ṣẹlẹ̀ ni pé àwọn ọba yẹn gan ò tí ì sọ̀rọ̀, mi ì tí ì gbọ́ kí any of the obas kó sọ̀rọ̀.
Kò sí nǹkan tó fẹ́ sọ.
Àwọn tó ń hu àwọn rúsídà, àwọn rúsídà yẹn, àwọn ní gbogbo wàhálà wọn pọ̀ tó ẹ lè lọ sórí social media lọ́jọ́ kan kẹ́ ẹ má gbọ́ nǹkan pa one of
bread and butter.
I mean, it's too bad. It's not uniting us.
Well, if it's not uniting us, let's have a program of Yoruba Gbode tó máa láàlì wọn pé àwọn ni ò jẹ́ kílẹ̀ wọn nígbàdùn.
It's not uniting us at all.
Let's go
Supported,
ahead.
Sir. I agree with you, sir. Let's go for it. They need to be told off.
I mean, let's be frank. We are really the soldiers. Lórí ọ̀rọ̀ yìí, àwa àtàwọn èèyàn bíi tiwa tó ní program tó fẹ́ kí àwọn ní foot soldiers fún nǹkan tá a fẹ́ ṣe. Tá a bá rẹni tó ń dàrin àwọn èèyàn wa rú, we challenge him or her, or challenge them in their multiplicity.
Yeah, kò sọ́jọ́ tẹ́ máa ṣí WhatsApp or TikTok or Instagram tẹ́ ní rí kan wọn tó ń bú ìdá kó máa bú eléyìí or kó máa bú onítọ̀hún.
Ká wá kó àwọn méjèèjì pọ̀ àbáwọn mẹ́fẹ̀ẹ̀fà pọ̀ ká bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí láálí wọn àbí.
Ó yẹ kó tún bá mọ àwọn tó ń ṣe iṣẹ́ yìí náà àbí.
Ká bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí láálí wọn.
No, sincerely.
Àní ṣẹ́rí tájábá ní àmì gẹ́gẹ́ sọ tó bá ní ògbójú ọdẹ ni á pa ọ̀bọ. Òun lọ̀rọ̀ tí bàbá sọ lálẹ́ yìí. For once, let us tell them, let us get together and tell them off, all of them.
All of them. Call their names.
Láǹfààní kankan tó ń ṣe wá. Then,
I mean,
because àǹfààní wo ni ìpá ṣe ìdí, òun lọ̀rọ̀ tó wà nílẹ̀ yìí.
Ká bú wọn, ká ṣe kiri kan, káwọn náà bú wa.
Because jẹ́ nǹkan kan fún wa sà.
Pé ìjà tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ yìí kì í ṣe láàrin ọba àtọba. Ìjà tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ is between people of different understanding of our problem. That's part of education.
Àwọn Ògùn á ní kò jẹ́, àwọn Bẹ̀nẹ̀ á ní kò jẹ́ nǹkan kan. Jẹ́ nǹkan kan fún wa. That is the truth.
Àwa là ń fún wọn láàyè.
Ẹ ṣé Ọ̀túnba.
Ẹ ṣeun.
Ẹ ṣé bàbá.
Ẹ ṣé o, ẹ ṣé o bàbá.
Yeye.
Yeye ti gbéṣẹ́ lé yín lọ́wọ́. Yeye ti lọ sùn, wọ́n ní tẹ́ bá ti Mexico dé ká sọ fún pé kẹ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ iṣẹ́.
Mo fẹ́ dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ gbogbo ilé o, ẹ ṣé o.
Ẹ má dúpẹ́ láìpẹ́ mi o, ẹ má dúpẹ́ láìpẹ́.
Ẹ dúró olóòtú ń bọ̀ o, wọ́n ní pé internet já wọn, she's trying to get back in.
Mo ti sọ fún wọn kán yé lo àwọn laptop Ìjẹ̀bú yẹn.
Á dà fún yín. Ẹ wò. Òótọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ nìkan má sọ wọn. Òótọ́ ọ̀rọ̀.
Kọ́lọ́tù tó dé ẹ pé bàbá Aliu àti
Bàmẹ́tò. Lẹ́yìn Bàmẹ́tò máa lọ sọ́dọ̀ bàbá Aliu. Bàmẹ́tò ẹ̀yin ló kàn.
Ẹ ṣe sẹ́rí mo wo lórí kíní platform ó dà pé bàbá Bánkọ́lé ẹ̀yin lẹ pósì bóyá bìkan mo dẹ̀ ti rí sá ibi tí Pastor Bakare tó lálì gbogbo ọjọ́ wọn yẹn. He said something ó relate mọ́ tẹ sọ́nsìn pé àwọn ló yẹ kán máa preach sáàyàn pé báyìí ní irú tó jẹ́ wàhálà wa bọ́ torí pọ́n jẹ́ ń bẹ̀ wọ́n ti jẹ́ dòdò wọn lè sọ òdodo mọ́. Ó sọ fún wọn náà ta láàfáà pastor including himself, Pastor Bakare was saying it. He was cursing them. Ó dẹ̀ rí fásitì gbà tó ti sọ kínní ẹ̀ náà ní maybe 2018 ló ń sọ similar something. But these people are the ones that are making things tough for us. Yàtọ̀ sí àwọn media tó ń gbé síbi gbé sọ̀hún. But definitely àwọn bá wọn lè sọ̀rọ̀. Wàhálà tá à ń ní gan tó fi jẹ́ pé Yorùbá ò lè lọ àwọn náà ń kọ̀ sí ẹ̀. Ìjọba ó tún á help wọn in the sense that tẹ́nìkan bá lòun gbẹnu jáde láti sọ báyìí wọ́n á wá ní wọ́n máa lọ wó nítorí láti mú wọn silence everybody. Problem ta ní nìyẹn when people want to come out wọ́n tẹ̀ ń gbọ́rọ̀ kẹ̀kẹ́ kan máa ṣe nǹkan kan tí ń lọ ń sa àwọn èèyàn already náà tán rẹ́dà ti say yes we gonna face you. So we have problem. I don't know how we can solve it. But ọlọ́run àsọ̀fọ̀ ẹ̀ náà tó kan pásọ̀ kan náà yìí ń sọ náà tó náà sọ pé gbogbo alágbádá aṣọ wọn máa fàyà mọ́ lára ni pé Yorùbá ní sáádẹ̀ dúró. Òun náà go back into old things tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ ní. Àwọn èèyàn wa náà ní àwa Yorùbá àdá mi mọ́ tó ń ṣe wá. We are not good. À ń sọ̀rọ̀ mọ́rẹ́mọ́rẹ́ ń bì àwọn kan máa lọ gbé síta ní pé àwọn tó ń sábẹ́nu gan ni. Àwọn àbí kan tá à ń ṣe mítì tẹ́nìkan lọ sọ screen gbogbo àwa táwa ń bẹ̀ tó lọ gbé aṣáyé.
Àwọn náà nìṣòro Bámẹ́tò àwọn náà nìṣòro irú àbáyà nìṣòro àní anything to worry for. Nítorí báwọn ní kan gbé lọ and like I said irú àbáyé tá a bá dẹ̀ ti lè torí pé ta fẹ́ jẹ mọ́ irú wa dẹ̀ pọ̀ ń bí. That is the truth. Nítorí pé ta fẹ́ gbà lọ́wọ́ anybody. Let's go for it. So we need to get ourselves together and tell them off. Jẹ́ nǹkan kan fún wa. They're just useless, all of them. Torí bàbá fà lọ tàbá fà bọ̀ wọ́n mọ̀ sẹ́ kúmọ̀ tá ọba Ọ̀yọ́ dá sí ọba Ònìṣà ọ̀dá ọba Oǹdó dá sí ọba kan kí wàhálà yín kílẹ̀ ń kóra yín. And it's also mentioned here tonight pé tá a bá tiẹ̀ dá sílẹ̀ tá a bá fẹ́ ṣe referendum kọ́ tẹ̀ fún ọtí tó bá tiẹ̀ ṣàgbà ní pé okay referendum wípé bí Faraji sí tó ṣe lead Cameroon láti ṣe referendum tó máa ṣe referendum that referendum will not carry us anywhere because ìtorí ìṣòro tó pọ̀ fún wa we are not going to win.
Àlùbáà sọ fún pé kó má ṣe kó má dá sí pé Ọlọ́run á ṣe tiẹ̀. Irọ́ tó ń pamọ́ Ọlọ́run gan ó máa ń dùn mí.
Bàbá òun ni mo sọ fún yín sí pé àwa nìkan ni Jésù sọ lẹ́yìn bàbá sọ fún òun lálẹ́ àná òun fẹ́ lọ tọ́lẹ̀tì Ọlọ́run sì pè òun àná òun fẹ́ lọ tọ́lẹ̀tì Ọlọ́run dẹ̀ pè òun pé kàn sọ fún gọ́vnà Ondo State pé kàn gbàwẹ̀ ń bẹ̀ yẹn dáadáa.
Bàbá Aliu
Baba Aliu. Baba Aliu.
Okay, ẹ kálẹ́ sà, ẹ má bínú pé mo tó fẹ́.
No.
Ìmọ̀ràn kan mo fẹ́ mú wá. So bẹ̀t kí etí tí mo lè sọ ń bì, mi ò mọ̀ pé bóyá tọ́lọ̀ bá ní kí ààyè rẹ̀ yọ, bóyá tá a bá parí program yìí ni o, bí àgbà mi lè bá fi sí ni o. Mo fẹ́ mú ìmọ̀ràn kan wá lórí ọ̀nà àbáyọ. So that bí a tẹ́ pé ní tàbájọ wò ó síra wọn pé n tó bá yẹ ká sí ìmọ̀ràn tó dáa ni.
I promise I'll call you. I'll call you later.
Okay.
I'll just connect 1 or 2 or 3 more people.
Okay.
All right, sir. Tá bá rí yèyé.
Yèyé Ìbàdàn. Àlọ́ ó ṣe é lọ sí Gbági.
Èrò.
Ṣé ẹni tó dẹ̀ dùn mí?
Ọ̀túnba.
Okay, sir, baba.
Ẹ jọ̀ọ́ má bínú, yèyé wà lórí fóònù, wọ́n ní wọn ò lè wọlé lórí Zoom, so wọ́n ní pé wọ́n wà lórí fóònù sí i. Ok, yèyé má sọ̀rọ̀ lọ o, wọ́n ń gbọ́ yín.
Kí gbogbo wa jẹ́ kí ohun tó ṣẹlẹ̀ ni pé mi ò mọ ohun tó ṣe íńtánẹ́ẹ̀tì bíbà ó ti ní wàhálà láti bí ọjọ́ mẹ́ta. So ó ń kú ó ń jí bọ̀tí lẹ́ẹ̀kan yóò tiẹ̀ wá kú pátápátá ni. Mo sì rí pé ọjọ́ ti lọ ní aago 6 lálápàárí, aago 7 ni ó fẹ́ lù yìí. Ká lè bá rí mi sọ, ká lè bá rí nǹkan sọ ní ọjọ́ 8, mo fẹ́ ká fi àdàgbà ilé ìrọ̀ tó bá jẹ́ pé ó ṣeé ṣe. Ṣùgbọ́n mo ní àwọn ìkéde kan tàbí méjì. Ìkéde kan ni nǹkan tí wọ́n fẹ́ ṣe níjọ́ Thursday. Ẹ dákun torí Ọlọ́run, gbogbo ẹni tó bá wà ní New York City Hall ni wọ́n ti fẹ́ ṣe ní aago 5 ìrọ̀lẹ́ ọjọ́ Àlàmísì, wọ́n pè ní African Day. A ti wá sọ pé gbogbo àwa Yorùbá tá a bá wà nítòsí ká túyáyá ká jáde nínú aṣọ ìbílẹ̀ àti gbogbo àwọn nǹkan tó fi wá hàn bí ojúlówó ọmọ Yorùbá. Àkọ́kọ́ wọn lélẹ́yìí, a sì fẹ́ fi ọ̀gbàgbà gbalẹ̀ níbẹ̀. Ẹ dákun, ẹni tó bá mọ gbogbo àwọn èèyàn tí ń bẹ New York ẹ sọ fún
wọn. Ṣé flyer wà tẹ́ lè gbé jáde tá a lè fi ránṣẹ́ sáwọn èèyàn wa tó wà níbẹ̀ tó wà ní New York?
Màá send ẹ̀ sí yín lórí WhatsApp.
Ẹ ṣeun.
Màá send ẹ̀ sí gbogbo ibi tí ọwọ́ bá lè dé lórí WhatsApp.
Kálẹ̀ last week ni èmi náà bá dẹ̀ lọ bẹ̀rẹ̀.
Máa bẹ̀rẹ̀ summer program tí àwọn ọmọ ti lè máa ní 40 hours láti kọ́ ẹ̀kọ́. Flyer yẹn náà wà, màá fi ránṣẹ́ sí gbogbo wa. Mi ò mọ̀ bóyá mo dọ́rọ̀ mẹ́nìkẹ́ni lẹ́nu, ẹ foríjì mí.
No, ẹ wà iná dà, ẹ continue.
Ká lè bá a padà ní ọjọ́ 8 pẹ̀lú agbára tí ó gbọ̀ngbọ́n. Èyí tó tún ṣe pàtàkì ni pé mo mọ̀ pé lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí flyer wa òun tètè jáde. Eléyìí ó yí padà, ẹ dákun tẹ́ bá ti rí flyer ẹ pè èèyàn. Iyì rẹ̀ ni ká kọ̀, ká fi ọgbọ́n kún ọgbọ́n. Nǹkan kan wà pàtàkì tí mo fẹ́ sọ lórí nǹkan tí à ń jíròrò lé lórí, ṣùgbọ́n Yorùbá ní ojúlọ́rọ̀ wà, ká sọ díjọ́ 8. Àbọ̀ mi rèé.
Ṣé lóòótọ́ ló ṣeré lọ sí Gbági?
Mo ṣeré lọ bó.
Gbági.
Gbọ̀ngàn mọ́ lọ o.
Gbọ̀ngàn náà lọ o.
Gbọ̀ngàn mọ́ lọ o.
Ẹ̀mí kan sọ fún mi pé mo rí méjì nìjẹ́, mi ò mọ̀ bóyá mi mọ̀rú ẹ̀mí yẹn bẹ̀.
Ẹ̀mí kẹ́mi nìyẹn o, ẹ̀mí kẹ́mi nìyẹn.
Ọlọ́run sọ fún
ẹ̀mí kẹ́mi. Oríṣiríṣi ẹ̀mí ló wà.
Ẹ̀yin wo lẹ tó ẹ jẹ́ kí gbogbo ẹ̀mí lẹ̀.
Oríṣiríṣi ẹ̀mí ló wà.
Ọ̀túnba lè fi ẹ̀mí lẹ̀ o, Ọ̀túnba ìṣẹ̀mí. Ẹ̀mí ni Ọ̀túnba.
Ẹ̀mí Mexico nìyẹn.
Ní ọjọ́ 8 bẹ́lẹ̀ mi ò bá tẹ̀síwájú nípa nǹkan tí à ń ṣe. Nǹkan tí ọ̀rọ̀ yìí ẹ dákun ẹ pé àwọn èèyàn. Ṣé ẹ rí nǹkan tí mo fẹ́ sọ tí mò ń sọ pé kòrókòró kì í ta kòrókòró jẹ? Mo lè sọ díẹ̀ lára ẹ̀. Òun náà ni nípa ìlú tá a lá fẹ́ gbà, a fẹ́ gbalẹ̀ tiwa, a fẹ́ ṣe gbà, a fẹ́ ṣàwo. Àwọn wa tá a fẹ́ gbalẹ̀ wa
dúró bó ṣe yẹ ká dúró. Ẹ bá àwọn èèyàn sọ̀rọ̀. Àìwí bẹ̀ ká kú bẹ̀. Èmi ni mo sọ tó bá dijọ́ mẹ́jọ máa fojú mi sí i. Torí kò sojú mi ń bẹ̀ ní ìsìn, ṣùgbọ́n èmi ni mo sọ. Ẹ bá àwọn èèyàn wa sọ èyí tí jẹ́ òótọ́ ọ̀rọ̀. Pàápàá àwọn tí wọ́n ní àwọn ń ṣe àjìjàgbara fẹ́ gba orílẹ̀-èdè wa. Ohun tó yẹ kí wọ́n ó ṣe tí wọn ò bá ṣe é, àwọn àníjọ àwọn èèyàn lójú, aláwọn èèyàn ò ní mọ̀ nílé, kò ṣe wọn ìgbà àwọn nǹkan ká wá gan tá à ń ṣe é ṣóyé wa. Àbá tá à ń pariwo ìyókù dijọ́ mẹ́jọ, ẹ̀jẹ̀ àfipamọ́ dijọ́ mẹ́jọ. Ẹni tó fúnni lówó fẹ́ kébi ó pa ni, ẹni tó fúnni nímọ̀ kò fẹ́ ká rìn lókun ẹni mà.
Ẹni tó bá ṣe yẹn.
Mo dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ yèyé mi o, Ẹgbẹ́ọlá Adékúnbí àtúnwẹ̀ ẹ̀dùn tó kọ́ mi láṣà àmújèrè àṣà. Ìrẹ̀ ní mo gba ará àlágbẹ̀dẹ gbogbo rẹ̀ sọ̀rọ̀ ibikíbi tó bá wà.
Ilé rẹ̀ ni o. Àbálòpọ̀ mọ̀ṣọ́ ló ń fẹ́ ṣe yèyé ẹ ní sùúrù. Ẹ máa ní sùúrù.
Ọ̀túnba wé mọṣẹ́.
Ó dijọ́ mẹ́jọ o.
Mo kí gbogbo lé o, ó dàárọ̀ ká ní good weekend. Bye bye. Ẹ kú iṣẹ́.
Èmi tó wá ro báyìí ń kọ́ ẹ̀ tí ẹ̀ kí èmi ẹ wò mí.
Ṣé bẹ́ẹ̀ lẹ ṣe fóònù tálájà lò?
Ẹgbẹ́lẹ̀.
Ó ti tí Ìjẹ̀bú yẹn ò ṣiṣẹ́ lọ́wọ́ wọn tí Àwórì náà ń lò sí i. Ní ẹgbẹ́ Ọ̀tà ẹ̀dẹ̀ náà ti ṣe Patrick ọba wà ní àwọn àjẹ́ Ọ̀tà tó bá ń dúró sí.
Alájà Àbíkẹ́ àti ẹ̀gbọ́n yín rárá.
Bóyá àwẹ̀ dẹ̀ ti tán kí àbí mi wàá mọ̀ bóyá.
Àwẹ̀ ti pa kò sá àwẹ̀ kẹ̀.
Àwẹ̀ nínú àwọn.
Àwẹ̀ arúgbó ni.
Ṣé àwọn pé ńgbà táwẹ̀ yẹn tán ìtorí bó ṣe ká mi lára mo tún gba 18 kan sí.
Àwẹ̀ arúgbó ni.
Lẹ́yìn tó tán mo gba 18 mo gbà fúnra mi ní anyway. Mo dẹ̀ gbà fún ilẹ̀ Yorùbá. All right.